Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Overview and Scrutiny Commission meeting of the 1st of February 2021. Welcome members of the press and the public watching this meeting live. I'm Councillor Tina Balban, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. This meeting is being held in public and not a public meeting. There will be no public question time at any council meeting while virtual committee meetings are being held. So I'd like to stress the public and the press can still hear and see the meeting, but public speaking has been suspended and any written questions submitted in advance that are deemed acceptable by the council's monitoring officer will be read out as answered. There will be no supplementary questions. The agenda for this meeting is published and available on the council's website. For any committee meeting held virtually, all voting will be held via recorded vote taken by a Democratic Service team member on behalf of the chair. The exception to this are the approving of the minutes from the previous meeting or any other procedure item where the item's sole recommendation to the commission is to note the report. For those items, the chair will move the item and it will be presumed agreed unless a dissenting comment from any commission member is made. Before I invite members of the Commission to confirm their attendance, I ask that they please ensure their mobile phones are switched off or on silent, their backgrounds are plain or nondescript, and they are aware of their surroundings so they are not disturbed during the meeting. This includes making sure all TVs, radios and smart speakers are switched off, please. Commission members are reminded that they should have their microphones turned off unless speaking, and their camera turned off unless they are requesting to speak. When asked to speak, please turn your camera on, unmute yourself, pause for 3 seconds to allow for the slight time connection delay. With this in mind, Commission members are asked to be aware of who they will follow in the voting process and to prepare accordingly. Before we start the formal proceedings of the meeting, I'd like to call for a minute's silence in respect of the former Mayor and Councillor Raj Sharman, who sadly passed away recently. Thank you, everyone. Now may I ask the officers supporting this meeting to introduce themselves, giving their name and job title.
I'm Chris Padlow, Democratic Services Manager and the Interim Monitoring Officer.
Heather Girling, Democratic Services Officer.
We now be taking introductions together with items 2 and 3. Please can I ask committee members when called upon to confirm their name and the ward they represent, if they have any declarations of interest and whipping declarations to make, and if they agree the minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission held on the 23rd of November 2020.
Can I invite Councillor Aylings?
Hello, my name is Councillor Ayling. I'm the councillor for Bewbush and Bullfield North. I have no declaration of interest Thank you. And I agree the minutes. Thank you.
Councillor Tina Belbin.
Hi, as I said before, I'm Councillor Tina Belbin. I represent Pound Hill North and Forge Wood. I have no declarations of interest and whipping declarations to make, and I agree the minutes of the 23rd of November.
Councillor Bob Burgess.
Hello, I'm Councillor Bob Burgess, Councillor for Three Bridges and the Town Centre. I have no whipping declarations, I have no interest to declare, and I agree the minutes of the previous meeting.
Councillor Richard Barrett.
Thank you. I'm Richard Barrett, Councillor for Pound Hill North and Forge Wood Ward. I have no whipping declarations to make. I'll declare a personal interest in item 12, Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee, as a member of West Sussex County Council, and I agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of November. Thank you.
Councillor Bob Lanza.
Thank you. I'm Bob Lanza, Councillor for Pound Hill South and Worth Ward. I agree the previous minutes. I declare a personal interest as a member of West Sussex County Council in item 6, Climate Change Scrutiny Panel, Final Report, and item 8, the Budget and Council Tax. Thank you.
Councillor Malik. Councillor Malik.
Yep. Good evening, Councillor Shahzad Malik from Langley Green and Tushmoor Ward. I do not have a declaration to make, and I agree with the minutes of the last meeting. Thank you.
Just for clarity's sake, Councillor Malik's not been able to put his camera on, but members of the can see he is present and can hear his voice. So I was confirming that. Councillor Tom McElhaney. Does not appear to be with us. Councillor Penlington.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Alison Penlington, Councillor for Pound Hill South and Worth Ward. I have no disclosures of interest or whipping declarations, and I'm very happy to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 23rd of November.
And finally, Councillor Rana.
Oops, sorry about that. Good evening. I'm Councillor Tahira Rana of Broadfield. I don't have any interest or declarations to declare, and I agree with the minutes held on the 23rd of November. Thank you.
And for record's sake, there are a number of other councillors also present at the meeting, which is Councillor Jaggard, Johans, Lamb, Mullins, Councillor Peter Smith, Councillor Brenda Burgess are also on the call. Chair, over to you.
Thank you. The Commission agrees that the minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission held on the 23rd of November are an accurate record of the meeting. Public. I'm bringing Councillor Lanza. I believe you have some declarations.
Councillor Lanza, did you want to say something?
Declarations of interest?
Yeah, was you?
Yeah.
Anything else? Sorry.
No, nothing. Well, I'd already declared some. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry.
Okay. Right. Thank you. As I said, the minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission held on the 23rd of November are an accurate record of the meeting. Public question time. In the terms of the public question time, I can confirm that no written questions have been received from the public. So we move on then to our first item on our agenda, which is the petition to save Crawley's Adventure Playgrounds. A petition has been submitted to the Council regarding Crawley's Adventure Playgrounds. In line with the Council's petition scheme, The petition was accepted with 959 valid signatures and is now before the Commission for their consideration and comment before going to the Cabinet for their response. In accordance with the virtual committee procedure rules, the principal petitioner has submitted a statement that will be read out by the Democratic Services Officer. Following this, Councillor Chris Mullins, Cabinet Member for Wellbeing, and Kate Wilson, Head of Community Services, will present the report, and I invite the Commission to debate and discuss this. Please can I ask Democratic Services Officer to read the statement from the principal petitioner, please.
Thank you, Chair. Statement regarding the closure of Crawley's adventure playgrounds. The adventure playgrounds are part of Crawley's history. They have been around for 60 years. I grew up spending most of my childhood playing in them, as did my parents, and so have my children. They are still well used by many local families. We love having somewhere to go that provides a safe place to be outside, socialising and exercising, with toilets, staff and refreshments available to all. Parents can meet up and we can bring the little ones along, and they play here all day. They make new friends, gain confidence, get fresh air and exercise without it costing a fortune. Play is proven to be a vital part of a child's development. Play improves the cognitive, physical, social and emotional well-being of children and young people. Through play, children learn about the world and themselves. They also learn skills they need for study, work and relationships, such as confidence. Throughout the last 12 months, the younger people within our community have suffered severely. They have been forced into lockdowns and quarantine, taken away from their peers, family members, schools and general social circles. Many children have shown to be struggling with their mental well-being, and here you are saying that when they are finally able to get out and mix again, they will have nowhere to go. Youths of today are the future of this town, and it is how we treat them and look after them now that will have a huge impact on the future employment and economy of Crawley. Just because they can't speak up does not give anyone the right to ignore their human rights to play and good mental health. The adventure playgrounds also offer reasonable priced childcare services throughout school holidays for those of us that don't have the ability to pay private fees whilst we are at work. For some parents, this is a lifeline and we will be lost without it. Without these supervised play areas, where can you go knowing that the kids can roam free without the worry of safety and knowing there is always a safe adult to hand if needed? Where will our children go to socialise now? What type of people could these areas attract if unsupervised? It will be the older generation complaining when they are out on the streets, causing mischief and creating issues due to boredom, or the council complaining when having to deal with the cost of therapy requirements due to them stopping going out, socialising, relying solely on technology. We don't have the old youth clubs anymore, so these are usually their only safe options. What good will your decisions do for the mental health of the next generation? Please, we urge you to look at the options again and review this decision. End of statement.
Thank you, Heather. Please can I ask Councillor Mullins, Cabinet Member for Wellbeing, to introduce the report to the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got to say, in all honesty, it's with sadness that I have to introduce this report, because I know that the adventure playgrounds have played a vital role in Crawley's past, and there are many children in Crawley that have great memories of what the certainly what the earlier play areas were, you know, and what they became, and they gained a lot from them. But we, you know, so I have great empathy with the petitioners in terms of their need, or their felt need to produce this to us, and for them to appeal to us to look at it again. But we are in a situation of reality, and I find it very difficult, but that's what we're facing. We're under the background of increasing financial pressures, and we need to achieve balances in our future budgets for 21, 22 and on. We have to have looked very carefully at our adventure playgrounds and come to realise that 2 of them actually don't make the grade in terms of involvement with children, and that's the adventure play area up at Creasy's Drive and the one down at the Mill Pond. We will be refurbishing Waterley Adventure Playground, and there will be 2 adventure playgrounds still available, under different circumstances, which we can talk about in a minute. But they, you know, so we still end up with 2 in the town, which is very good, really. We've been reviewing this for some time now, and as part of the budget process, we've had to look at savings in our budgets, and this policy will save us £210,000 per annum, and it will also save us the cost of something like 500 to 750k to refurbish the 2 remaining adventure playgrounds, the Mill Pond and Creasy's Drive, which is considerable money in the circumstances that we're finding ourselves in. We've done some equation on it, and with the costs of running the 4 centres as they are now, the figure comes out as something like £30 an attendance per child, which is actually not viable in cost terms. We don't achieve any real return on that in revenue, and so it's a cost on the council. And it's also the case, and it's sad to realise this, but there's been a 68% reduction in the number of children attending our adventure play services for whatever reason. It might be that they're more into computer games, or there might be other attractions that they're going to, and it might be that historically we've had more children in the town perhaps than what we got now. I don't know about that bit, but it's a bit of a guess that children grow up and get older, and these days many move away to start families in different towns. So there can be lots of reasons for that, but you know, in the past 20 years we've seen the visits go down from 94,000 to about 30,000 visits per annum at the adventure playgrounds, which is some considerable reduction, which brings onto us these very hard decisions that we're having to make. Having said all of that, we have a wide variety of play provision in Crawley, and many of our unsupervised play areas have been refurbished or are being refurbished, and we can be very proud of the amount of open play areas that we got, and these are places that are well used and that children still enjoy. We will be focusing as well on activities for children going forward. It's not as though we're going to close these and do nothing. I mean, we will be looking at whether we can take outreach to the communities in street play and etc., and using facilities outside and other activities for children in their localities, and trying to build it that way. It is worth saying that the aim of the play areas, because it's from 5 to 13-year-old children, not teenagers, because there was one comment in the petition about youth services being closed by the county council. Our adventure playgrounds were never meant for youth. They were meant for up to 13 years old. And you know, whilst we regretted the closure of the youth centres by the county council, it is not our position to replace them in that way. I won't go on much more, but to say that I have got a couple of reservations myself in this, and I will be talking with the officers to ensure that I'm happy and satisfied with the operation of the remaining centres. I'm concerned about them being completely unsupervised, to be frank. because these days there are all sorts of odd characters out in society, and I'd be worried about children going into those adventure playgrounds, nobody keeping an eye on them, specifically when you're talking about 13-year-olds or whatever, who are at quite a vulnerable age. So I've got reservations, I will say that elsewhere, about completely unsupervised, and I think that we've got to address that. But all in all, Chair, we are in a dire straits financially as a town. None of us could have foreseen this pandemic that was coming, and none of us could have fully understood what the future would look like financially, and we still can't paint a picture of what it's going to look like, even in the recovery scenario, which we're all looking forward to. We are in a situation where, whilst I have empathy with this petition of probably not being able to change our policy, but that's a discussion actually for the Cabinet. But I'll leave it there for now, because I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions, and I know Kate and I would be quite happy to answer those, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mallingers. May I ask Kate if she'd like to add anything before I open this up for discussion?
No, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take questions as Councillor Mullins needs.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. The process for discussion on the report will be as follows. Each committee member will have the opportunity to speak. Please indicate you wish to speak by turning your camera on. When you're called on to speak, please unmute your microphone and check that you are live before making your comments, pausing for 3 seconds to allow for the time delay. Once you have spoken, please ensure you turn your camera off and mute your microphone. All committee members who have indicated will be called on to provide comments and ask questions in turn, with officers responding to any queries raised. If there is to be any proposed amendments to the recommendation, then please propose these during this round of providing comments. We will now begin consideration of the report.
Councillor Bob Burgess.
Thank you very much indeed. Firstly, I want to say it is a very good thing that people who are concerned about an issue are prepared to organise a petition that is on an issue that is close to their heart. A positive thing about any petition is that it gives both officers and members the opportunity to reassess any proposals that have been made. I do have some observations to make, and then at the end a question. In the petition, it mentions that the adventure playgrounds, are well used by so many local families. It seems to me, on reading the report, that comment is not currently backed up by figures for usage, sadly. Also, it is my feeling that young people today tend very much to have different expectations about their play as happened in former years. Thirdly, in these challenging times, it is vital that any money that we are using is spent wisely and most efficiently, and also that the staff working in the area are doing so in the most effective way. I also believe that the 4 adventure playgrounds sites, as currently configured, do not allow for best use of them. But my question is this: have other providers been considered for taking on the playground? I'm thinking here of a group like Play England, a not-for-profit organisation. So I'm not talking about privatisation, but a different and hopefully more effective and efficient provider. I stress, as I say, I'm not talking about a profit-making organisation, but these are groups, Play England are groups that can access funding from other such places, such as Children in Need and the Lottery. So could consideration please be given to using or looking at that as a possible provider of any funding. Thank you.
You happy for me to take that one, Chair?
Yes,
Yes.
Kate.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Burgess, for your comments. So Play England was the quango in place that set the sort of strategic direction for play nationally. But you are right, there are local organisations, not necessarily specifically coming to us to deliver an alternative to the adventure playground provision, but certainly there are other community groups and providers that are interested in the adventure playground sites. So I think what we need to do over the coming months, and obviously you'll see in the report that we have a transition period that we're able to apply because of some government grant funding, but we'll be able, once we've established with members what potential future use might look like, then we can have conversations with those third parties moving forward. But as far as I'm aware, we've not been approached by anyone looking to deliver the exact service like for like.
Chair, can I come back a moment?
You can do the next one.
Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. Kate, you just mentioned that the council has not been approached by these other providers, but have we, as a council, gone out and actively approached them?
At this point, we haven't, Councillor Burgess, no.
Right, is that a possibility that is distinctly on your radar? I would hope it is.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. At this point, we haven't made plans to do so. What we need to be mindful of is that the operating costs of the adventure playgrounds are significant. So it's whether it's viable in terms of the financial position that the council finds itself in at the moment. But it's certainly a consideration that members could make.
Councillor Mullins?
Yeah, thank you. Could I also add, Bob, it's a great idea, but one of our problems is the absolute costs of refurbishing the two. I mean, Waterley we've accounted for, and that will be done, but the other two, we would have to find something like 500k or more, if you like, to refurbish those to some sort of standard. So would a voluntary body come in and be able or willing to pay that sort of money to bring those centres up to some sort of standard? That's the problem we've got, is that they're quite old and they need modernising. I mean, if somebody came and made us that sort of offer, we'd have to look at it. Of course we would. But I think the refurbishment costs are going to be a problem, and that's what the problem is for us.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Marion, have you got a question?
Yes, thank you. Well, more of a statement, I suppose. I'm not happy about the Ifield Mill Pond being closed, but I understand why it's happening. Can you assure that the outreach play will be a good and something that the children will want to engage with? Because if it doesn't meet their needs, they won't use it, and then that will drop off, and then we won't have that either. Also, has special needs, children with special needs, been taken into account? Because if they can't access it, then that is a big chunk of the children that won't be able to use it. Also, I think it's worth asking people if they would be willing to take on the place, the adventure playgrounds, even if they have to refurbish it, because they might take that into account of the cost. I mean, obviously there will be a cost, and they will probably charge people for going into it, but they might be willing to take on the adventure playgrounds even though they need refurbishing. I mean, if you ask these people, I don't know who they are, but these people that do these adventure playgrounds, if they say no, we're no worse off. If they say yes, then we've still got adventure playgrounds. So they can be taken back into a council when when the finances get better. So I think it's worth considering asking people to take on the adventure playgrounds, even the Broadfields one, even though they need a lot of refurbishing, because they might be willing to take them on. You don't know unless you ask. Thank you.
Okay, shall I come in there, Chair?
Kate, are you going to?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Ayling. So just to take each of your points in turn, if I may. So for absolute reassurance, yes, the community outreach programme will definitely work in Bewbush. The beauty of it actually is that we can get even better coverage across the whole town as well. Obviously, even within those neighbourhoods and wards where there isn't an adventure playground at the moment. And the kind of activity that we'll be doing, it will obviously be using our huge number of parks and open spaces, and also potentially other buildings as well, but it's much more flexible because it's not reliant on those single fixed buildings, which we believe will be more appealing to a broad range of children. And you're absolutely right to mention children and young people with disabilities and special needs. And as part of our process, we'll be undertaking full equality impact assessment to make sure that we're not disadvantaging anybody. But our expectation is that our community outreach programme will be fully accessible. But we are working those plans up at the moment, and we'll be able to bring those forward for members to see later in the year. And again, just to confirm that there's been a number of organisations from our local voluntary community sector that have expressed interest in the adventure playground sites. It's just, as you say, it's just exploring what those opportunities might be and what investment might be needed, but we can pursue those conversations.
Councillor Ayling, would you have any further comments to make?
No, that's answered my questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
If some more, I'll put my camera back on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bob Lanza, I believe you have some comments to make.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Mullins and to Kate Wilson for this report. This is one of several savings that had to be considered in order to balance the budget for the next financial year. And I think councillors across the board have made strenuous efforts to identify savings that respond to the comments in public consultation apart from anything else. And this particular service was one of those areas in the public consultation which didn't have majority support to retain. That said, the 4 adventure playgrounds do have a rich history of play provision. There's no question about that. But what we can't do, and Councillor Mullins referred to this, is ignore the realities in paragraph 6.1. We see since the year 2010 a 68% reduction in usage of the adventure playgrounds. In a way, that's a kind of vote. It's people telling us what they like, what they don't like, what they don't wish to continue to use. It's almost one of the best forms of consultation available. You can't buck a trend like that. We've tried to, but we've demonstrated that we're unable to. And what I mean by that is that as well as the revenue savings we're talking about here, the 4 adventure playgrounds have received substantial capital investment over the years to keep the offer fresh and to refurbish them. And as Councillor Mullins pointed out, there would need to be a further substantial sum to be spent on 3 of the adventure playgrounds, which exceeds the capital funds that are available. And with this attendance of 30,000 or so at £30 per head, what that £30, not £30 per head, £30 per individual attendance, what that means is that you'd only have to attend one child attend an adventure playground for 7 times, and at that point that would be equivalent to the entire council tax payable by one household for all of Crawley Borough Council services. What we're hearing about is an alternative model, that of outreach, in terms, because let's face it, it's not buildings and structures that provide services. It's people, it's our staff, it's our play workers who provide the services. And by moving to more of an outreach model, I believe we can get to more people, we can provide more. And I further believe that we will see within this council and other local authorities doing exactly the same thing. That is recognising that these days physical structures are not as effective necessarily as delivering services as the outreach model. And we're going to see ourselves do that, I think, with other services. We're going to see other councils do that with their services as well. The hard choice is to be made here, but ultimately we have to balance that budget to ensure continuity of core services. I think we do have a good alternative proposed, and I know for sure that we as a town are very well provided for in terms of open space, unsupervised play, parkland, especially in relation to our overall size, and that is something to be proud of. Thank you.
Kate, would you like to pass comment? Councillor Mullins? No? Councillor Mullins, would you like to?
Well, yes, thank you. I'll just say thank you to Bob for the clarifications. Really, what he made was a statement rather than a question, and I appreciate that because he made and highlighted the elements that we have to find, we have to work to, and that's the sort of reality of the situation and perhaps the sadness of the situation. But rather than being negative, because I'm always a half pint full sort of person, I like to think forward and build things, and I think we've got things to do, and if I'm in this portfolio, then I will be making sure that we've got things to do, got involvement with our children, and we're putting activities on. So thank you for that, Bob. That was helpful, you know, as it could be, really.
Thank you, Chris. I've got Councillor Richard Barrett wanting to make a comment now as well. Can I bring in Councillor Barrett, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Yeah. Really, it was. I suppose it's following on from what Councillor Lanza said. I mean, I think, you know, none of us like to see a facility close, but I think we've got to look at the realities of this. And Chris said something that I thought was very pertinent in his comments. He said that the adventure playgrounds are an important part of Crawley's history. And I think that's the point. I think they served a purpose in a particular point in time during a number of decades where the facilities they provided were exactly what Crawley children wanted. I remember I didn't particularly use them much myself when I was a child, but I had many friends who did as children and teenagers, and they were what was wanted in the 1970s and the 1980s. That was a particular way in which children wanted to play, places they wanted to go, and we provided that. The problem is that they haven't changed since then. And whilst Chris talks about the fact that there's been a financial imperative for it, and that actually we've got to make savings, I do wonder how long it would have been before we would have had to make these changes anyway, even if there hadn't been savings. Because actually, I think what we've got is a service which has become outdated and which really needs bringing up to standard and bringing up to the way of working and the way of providing services that are needed in the 2020s. Now, you know, Bob Lanza talked about moving away from building provision, and I think that's important as well. When we look at so many changes that are going on to services across all local authorities, there is this general trend about moving away from this assumption that providing everything in a static building and expecting people to come to you at that building is the right thing to do, when actually, you know, there are an awful lot of people out there who aren't able to do that for whatever reason, or won't do that. And it's much better to take the service to those people and to take the service to those people who are particularly in need. And you can really target them by doing that. So whilst I understand the reasons behind the petition, and I can understand the concerns and perhaps the nostalgia that a lot of people feel for the adventure playgrounds, this is not simply saying, we're going to close them down and there won't be a service. It's saying we're going to provide a service in a different way that's actually more targeted to those people who are in need. So for that reason, I do think on balance it is the right thing for us to be doing. I did have one question for Kate, if I may, which is with regard to this point again, which Bob referred to about the £30 average cost per visit, which is referred to in bullet point 3. It does say that this ranges from £4.11 to £85.22 across the different sites, which is a huge swing actually. But even £4.11 is quite expensive per visit. £85.22 is astronomical. I would be interested to know which two centres those extremes actually relate to, and also what the other two figures are for the other two in between that come to an average of 30, because I did find it very, very interesting and quite surprising that there was such a big variance there, and I would be interested to know what the figures are for each of the 4 playgrounds, so that we can just see. I'm assuming £4.11 is one of those that we're keeping, and 85.22 is one of those that we're not, but perhaps Kate can answer that.
Kate, have you got those figures to hand, or would it be best perhaps to supply them in the members' information bulletin so Richard can have them?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't have them to hand at the moment, but if I was to tell you that the key difference is our sites are typically very busy during the school summer holidays, so the lower amount, so the £4.11 will without question relate to a sunny August day at one of our busier sites, and the more expensive, the £80+ per visit, will apply to term time, sort of after school territory at one of our lesser used sites. But I will provide members with the absolute detail there so you can see.
Okay, could I just come back on that to say thank you very much to Kate, but I had actually misunderstood. I thought those were a sort of cost per site, but what you're saying is it could be a particular day or a particular time of year in addition. So it's a bit more complicated than what I'd originally thought. I'll look forward to reading those as and when. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Ayling, do you wish to make further comments? You had your camera on. Councillor Ayling, do you wish to comment?
You're on mute.
Councillor Ayling? Right.
No, sorry, I put my camera on by mistake.
Okay, thank you. I shall summarise them with some comments of my own. I think it's sad that children no longer feel the need to socialise outside, but we have to face the reality of those figures. Society, cultural needs are evolving all the time. In the 50s, people used to go to dances. People then started watching television, and we've got to accept that the children now play differently. They interact over the internet, playing these games. And it's unfortunate, but that's, as Richard said, the adventure playgrounds were a very important part of our history. Going forward, we've got Tilgate Park with Go Ape. I know for a fact that schools offer a lot more clubs than they did when my children were at school, for example. So there are plenty of facilities for the generation coming along. And maybe perhaps in the future we will have one super playground, who knows? But at the moment we cannot afford to maintain, unfortunately, all 4. So I'd like to move on then, say that all committee members have now had the opportunities to speak, and I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate on considering the petition are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair second, please. Councillor Rana, can you second?
I second that, Chair.
The comments are agreed. I'd like to thank the principal partitioner for submitting the petition. The Commission's comments and petition will be considered at the Cabinet on Wednesday evening. So we move on then. Thank you, Kate and Councillor Mullins. Item 6, Climate Change Scrutiny Panel Final Report. We're now going to receive the Climate Change Scrutiny Panel Final Report from Councillor Kim Jaggard. Please can I ask Councillor Jaggard, as Chair of the panel, to introduce and present the report to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so I'd like to present to you the Climate Change Scrutiny Panel Report, OSC 292. First of all, this was a really complex, wide-ranging scrutiny panel, and I would like to thank all the officers involved across several services, including Crawley Homes, Environmental Services, Sustainability, Planning, Commercial Property and Assets, and also to the Cabinet members who also attended our meeting and made contributions. So I'd like to remind you that the scrutiny panel was created by a notice of motion back in July 2019. Whilst the motion had several key points, the one regarding the scrutiny panel was very, very specific. It was to look at and make recommendations focusing on the workings and activities of Crawley Borough Council relating to carbon emissions, and to report back to the Council as soon as was practical. Council further requests that the OSC adopts a member or members of the Youth Council to be members of the scrutiny panel. And unfortunately, despite many requests, we couldn't actually get anybody from the Youth Council, which was rather disappointing. But our first meeting way back in November 2019 was pre-COVID, and it was open to members of the public, and there were a lot of public members there. There was no public question time, but there was a great deal of public interest, and so the panel offered public engagement sessions where members of the public could request speaking rights on the meeting's theme or topic for that evening. Community groups were also invited, and those that spoke included the Crawley Green Party, Crawley Environmental Action, Crawley Extinction Rebellion, and also other members of the general public and residents. The panel recognised the scope was very wide, but we tried to remain as focused as we could, and we started off with a baseline audit to establish the current position that we are in, and then we looked at themes of transport, commercial and business, blue and green infrastructure, domestic buildings, and then a more general theme. And it was clear from our baseline audit and from the witness sessions, that was from Manor Royal, West Sussex County Council, Metrobus, that the council was doing more than some other local authorities. For example, our taxi policy, looking at electric and hybrid vehicles, we were recommending in the licensing that all taxis in the district become electric or zero or ultra low emissions by 2030. We also were looking at the EV, the council was also looking at the EV electric vehicle charging infrastructure network, which was considered back in June 2020, where the council pledged to continue its efforts to deliver an increasing number of electric vehicle charging points across the district in new homes, places of work, council car parks, and also on the street where we could. It's also good to see that action has already been taken on recommendation C, for example, the air quality management area. We've been has suggested that it be extended. Many local authorities were suggesting the creation of a dedicated climate change officer post, and Crawley Borough Council already has a sustainability manager. Other councils also proposed to look at the investment portfolios, considering environmental sustainability as one of those things with their investments. And as part of the motion, it was suggested that the head of corporate finance undertake a review of the ethical investment policy, and that was completed back in November 2019. So when we looked at all the other themes, it was clear that the scrutiny panel's views and recommendations should be included in a climate change action plan. This action plan should identify resources, sources of funding and timescales required for completion in order to ensure the council remains on its target of reducing at least by 45% by 2030 and to zero by 2050. The corporate action plan should be led by officers who have an in-depth knowledge, expert knowledge on the specific projects and a critical view of the council services. And the action plan should progress and action plan progress should be reported back to the OSC and to Cabinet on a regular basis. That's very important that we keep on track. So there were 19 recommendations in this report in total, which reflects the complexity and the wide-ranging nature of the remit, and it was set over the 5 themes. So I'm going to summarise the rationale behind just 8 of those recommendations, and there is far more, huge amounts of information in the full report. So the first one that I'd like to highlight is the transport recommendation D, which is on the electric vehicle charging. The panel acknowledged the report that came before the Cabinet in June 2020, but it believed that more work was still required, working with partners to benefit those residents, particularly without access to off-street parking. And an example was given from Cambridge City Council's strategy, which include rapid chargers, on-street street lamp chargers, but apparently we can't do that within West Sussex currently, and commercial chargers, home chargers. And it was clear that in order for people to switch to electric vehicles, there needed to be much more promotion about the advantages given the cost of the vehicles. And we would need to have serious consideration to the infrastructure, particularly, as I said, for those people who live in flats or terrace houses. And we've got a huge in Crawley, we have a huge problem with residential parking anyway, and this is going to be even more difficult. But there is funding available for this kind of thing, which is the on-street residential charge point scheme, and so that is a way forward, and that needs to be seriously looked at. Going down to recommendation E in the commercial and business section, the district heat network. Obviously, the new district heat network will provide a higher efficiency and pollution control, and it's a huge step forward in reducing our carbon emissions, even though the actual combined heat and power unit is going to be powered by gas. But it was acknowledged that this could be further decarbonised as new technologies emerge. For example, heat pumps and hydrogen are a way forward for the future, and we need to keep that in mind going forward. On recommendation F about K2, it was found that when we discussed K2, we found that the heating of the pool is one of the major sources of energy consumption, and the panel recognises that there's industry standards, and there are very mixed views from individuals who like the pool quite warm and those that rather have it cooler, but we would like that recommendation to be considered. We didn't have a specific recommendation about how much we could reduce the temperature, but maybe lower it a bit would be a way of cutting down that carbon that's produced by the K2. Looking at the blue and green infrastructure recommendation J, wildflower verges, and this has been raised repeatedly at full council meetings and has a varying level of support across the town. Some people love short, neat grass, other people much more like the wild type of things. But I would like to highlight a little thing that we have in Maidenbough going on, where a residents group has got together and set up the Maidenbough Be Wild project, working with the local Maidenbough Junior School. The Be Wild group are currently looking at how to adopt the verges via West Sussex County Council for wildflowers, and we're also promoting a 1 metre meadow where residents are encouraged to have a 1 metre or more, if they would like, to sow native wildflower seeds to make their own little meadow. And I think community projects like that are something that we really need to get on board with and to promote and support as much as possible, so that residents are actually taking responsibility as well, going forward as well. Recommendation K was about pedestrianisation. There was a strong desire from the panel following the new directions for Crawley presentation that pedestrianisation could be promoted where practical. Now, the boulevard was mentioned as there are so many flats along there, and many of them have got little or no outside space. There are no bus stops, and we felt that maybe we could have it as a seating area with and cafe spilling out, possibly a market type scenario. It has been, schemes like this have been very successful in Walthamstow Forest area, and further afield, Barcelona have got a big super block thing where they have quite a lot of pedestrianisation going on. Domestic buildings, which is recommendation M, the new housing really needs to be zero carbon standard from the start rather than retrofitting at great expense. And again, including electric vehicles in the new developments as they are being planned. It's madness to build huge areas, for example, in Forge Wood without any vehicle charging points. New developments must be thought, the carbon footprint and climate change must be considered right at the start of the planning, not retrofitting. It makes no sense. Going into the queue, general recommendations. This is possibly the most tricky. Papers for meetings. Prior to COVID, 22 councillors were paperless. Since April 2020, council meetings have been run by live events like this one, and councillors have received training using tablets, the Teams, the live events. Access to papers have been available via Modern Gov, but during the lockdown, to ease the remote meeting thing, councillors have been receiving hard copies. There's my hard copy. You've all got your hard copies. It's a huge amount of paper, and the financial and environmental impact, is vast. So moving to paperless meetings from May 2021 provides councillors with an opportunity to lead by example in this regard and to demonstrate that they too are prepared to embrace new technology to deliver savings, to reduce our carbon footprint. But it also must be remembered that this is not a new decision. It's returning to one that was agreed back in 2018. Now, the cost of printing the agendas from April 2020 to December 2020 was £1,823. It created 147 kilograms of CO2. It generated 18,000 sheets of paper. Officer time for printing and distributing these hard copies also need to be considered. The fuel to transport them round to councillors' houses. So the full council meetings have used 7,500 sheets of papers, OSC 2,500 sheets of papers. Tonight's meeting created over 13 kilograms of CO2, 3,000 sheets of paper. The notes for this meeting are also going to cabinet, and it's exactly the same stuff. We need to add officer time onto all of that, print time, collating the paper, fuel cost, the delivery. So many councils are now transitioning to paperless meetings. That this is going to be happening at some point, and I really think that we need to really consider the amount of paper, the amount of trees that are being cut down to just print great big wads of agenda and notes that after this meeting will probably just be binned. It's a huge. So, going on to S, lastly, as I said earlier, we need to have an officers advisory group who have the skills and knowledge and things to put all these actions and activities and timescales, the funding, they should be able to do that, and they need to be able to report back to OSC, to report back to Cabinet regularly, so that we can keep on track with these recommendations, because it's such a vast piece of work that I don't want it to be sort of left in a corner somewhere. We need to make sure that the recommendations, if agreed, are actioned. So that's a very quick whiz through of the summary of recommendations. I'm happy to answer questions. A lot of the meetings were a long time ago, so I don't know how much I will remember. So I'm fully supported tonight by Clem, Louise Skipton Carter and Heather for any of the difficult questions that I can't answer. So thank you.
Thank you for the report. The process for discussion will be as before. Each committee member will have the opportunity to speak. Please indicate by turning your camera on. When you're called on to speak, please unmute your microphone and check that you are live before making your comments, pausing for 3 seconds to allow for the time delay. Once you have spoken, please ensure you turn off your camera and mute your microphone. Thank you. We will now begin consideration of the report. Councillor Ayling, I believe you were first to...
Hello, can you hear me?
You're on, Councillor Ayling.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to say, talking about paperless meetings, not only is it the waste of paper and carbon and you know, petrol driving it round, we also need to consider the COVID. The more people that touch paper, the more chances there are for COVID to be passed on from one person to another. You know, the person who gives it to the driver then puts it through my door, I then pick it up, my children might pick it up, they go to school, I go to work, I'm just taking it on and on and on. So I'm in full agreement with paperless council meetings. We've had paperless before. I think we had full council was still paper, and maybe OFC might have been still paper, but all the other meetings were paperless, and I'm quite happy to go paperless. I'm quite happy to read the screen. If you can't read the screen, then, you know, get glasses. And I don't mean to be rude, but I think we need to just go into the 21st century. You know, paper was old way. You know, we're moving on with play services, we're moving on with everything else. And I think that, you know, the schools don't use paper, they email everything out to children. We hardly ever send a letter out to a child these days, quite rightly. You know, everyone's used to reading emails now, so we should be emails and not paper. Thank you.
Thank you
for the report.
Thank you, Marion. Can I ask Councillor Kim Jaggard to comment, please, on Councillor Ayling's comments? Would you like to comment, Kim?
Well, thank you, Councillor Ayling. We hadn't considered the COVID spreading aspect of that, so that is a good point, and I thoroughly agree. You know, I was teaching for many years, and well, you know, over 5 years ago, we were doing things by email, we were sending letters home, we were doing all of our work via different forms of technology, and yes, it is tricky to be in a Teams meeting and have to read a report, but I've just read my report notes are on my personal iPad, and I'm speaking to you on the screen, and and apparently it is possible to link another monitor to my tablet here, so that I could have the report on one screen, you guys on another screen. So it is possible. It's just getting used to it, and I think keep putting it off means that we're never going to get used to it. So I think that, you know, we are going to have to bite the bullet and go for paperless meetings.
Thank you, Councillor Jaggard. Can I just
agree that, sorry, can I just say that the longer we leave it, the harder it is. The sooner, I mean, we got pushed into using online meetings by the COVID, and when we first started, I was scared. I'm probably not on my own. I was scared. I'm thinking, oh my God, but we now do it secondhand. We know we just don't think about it. It's all just virtual now. So, we do get used to using a different way. And I think one of the things that has come out of COVID is that we are now using other systems. We would never have used this system before, and we've now got used to it. So I just think we just have to learn how to use it and have training on it. And the more you use it, the more you get used to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ayling. Can I bring in Councillor Bob Burgess, please? I believe you were the next one to put your camera on.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Firstly, I would like to thank the members, officers and other people who've worked so very hard to produce this very full and detailed report. They deserve a corporate round of applause. But one thing I did notice is that on page 19 of the report, and Kim referred to this in her introduction, it mentioned that the OSC would be asking the Youth Council to provide cooperative members or member onto the panel, but no one came forward. And I found that particularly disappointing. Were there any reasons for this non-participation? My feeling is that issues about climate change are very high on the agendas of many, many people. But sadly, it doesn't appear to be high on the minds of the Youth Council of Crawley. In years to come, they will be the people making the decisions. I, sadly, will not be around in 2050. Well, maybe not, but they will be. They will be the decision makers. Their views now would have been valuable. I would even go so far as to say they would have been invaluable. What discussions actually took place with the Youth Council to try and get them involved, and what did they have to say? And then on a couple of other points, it mentioned in the report that talking about working with neighbouring boroughs and districts. Is there any scope for cooperative working in order that the neighbouring boroughs and districts, with Crawley Borough Council, we can collectively reduce the climate situation even more? Also, in paragraph 713, the 9th bullet point mentions that currently there is no prioritisation for how money is spent. I would have hoped that this would, projects would be prioritised as and when that prioritisation is needed, and over time the prioritisation perhaps might change. There will be specific projects at specific times that are addressing the climate change. And finally, in paragraph 913, it mentions that progress on addressing climate change issues can be reported back to the OSC and Cabinet on a regular basis. I would say that is an essential. They must be reported back. I would perhaps think maybe annually, because we're now in 2021. Before we know it, we'll be in 2030, and we should have reached some of our targets. We need to know how we're getting on with these targets and what issues it is throwing up. So I would welcome comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Jaggard, would you like to comment, please?
Yeah, we sent out 2 lots of invitations to the Youth Council, but we didn't get anybody coming forward to join us on the committee, on the panel. As I said, it was disappointing, but we did try. But that's as much as I can say on that. It's annually for the review the reports. That's up to you guys for you to decide how frequently you would like an update. I missed your 3rd point, Bob. Sorry, the one that was before the 9.13.
It's about there's currently no prioritisation for how any money should be spent. And as these projects go forward, at one moment in time, a particular project will be top of the list in terms of priority. and others will be lower.
Right.
And that might change over time. And it needs to be dynamic. It's not just a, you know, that's the most important thing, and it always stays there. And we need to be alert to that, because who knows that, in a sense, you know, if we take COVID as an example, who would have thought that less than 12 months after COVID first started, there would be all these different vaccines available? People have said, oh, vaccines take 4 or 5 years to come on board. If there is a will to challenge climate change, or to do something about climate change, and I think there is, nationally and also internationally, we must be able to know what those challenges are. Because as I say, they may, you know, 6 months down the line, what is priority one now may be yesterday's bread.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I'm not on screen.
Councillor Burgess, have you finished now?
Yeah, I was going to
do you want to comment any further?
I was going to answer on that question. I think that last point is really for the working group, for the officers who have the expertise to actually be nimble and agile in their thinking and looking at the priorities. And I think that Louise Skipton-Carter is on this, so maybe she'll be able to add a little bit to that, and she would also be able to I believe that there is ongoing work with our neighbouring authorities, and again I think Louise Skipton-Carter would be the best person to comment on those 2 points. Bob, thank you.
Thank you.
I look forward to hearing Louise.
Can I bring in?
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, I'll just introduce myself, Louise Skipton-Carter. I'm the Sustainability Manager for those of you who may not know what I do or my role, also the wider public. So just answering as far as the cooperative working with the neighbouring councils, there is already a working group that's been set up across the whole of Sussex. Actually, all the districts, representatives from all the districts and boroughs at the sort of officer level dealing with climate change issues that meet about every 2 months, and we've been doing that for the last about 12 to 18 months, and sharing learning, sharing best practice, sharing ideas for joint projects, and trying to work together, because we know that we're all very closely related and can possibly bring forward projects that we can all work on together that will be more effective. I think that's, and I do understand there's also a West Sussex Climate Change and Biodiversity Board being set up, and that's got its first meeting in March, as far as I understand.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Can I bring in Councillor Bob Lanza now?
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank the panel for a very thorough piece of work, very fine piece of work, and the officers, and also Councillor Jaggard for an excellent presentation of the findings this evening. I think some telling points have been made, and one of them was made by Councillor Ayling, where she kind of referred to us doing things that we wouldn't have contemplated before. I think there's a lesson from the pandemic, and it's across the local government sector, not just Crawley. We all know about the need to save the planet, and we shouldn't need a second crisis to have spurred us on to do what we all know is right. And I'm thinking, for example, about the adoption of virtual meeting technology, which I don't imagine would have happened so quickly without the pandemic. I think it should have happened quicker, and it should have happened a long time ago. Referring to the recommendations, recommendation I under blue and green infrastructure, there's a reference to the replacement of felled trees, and I'd like to think that we could not just make that one-to-one replacement ratio, but look for opportunities to make it greater than a one-to-one replacement ratio wherever that is possible. And I want to go to recommendation Q and the paperless argument, and I think it is absolutely right to go paperless. Clearly, many of us own printers at home as well for small volume print output if we really need some. I think I'd also caveat the recommendation with the need to continue to ensure that elected councillors are offered the right visual aids to support going paperless. It might be, in some cases, larger screens, it might be magnifiers, it might be all sorts of assistive technologies on top of the basic IT kit offer, and I think that's very important. By going paperless, we'll be setting an example on the climate change and environmental agenda generally, but there is another area where we should be setting an example, and I think we could usefully have an additional recommendation, and I think it would be to the governance committee, because what we've seen during the pandemic are three types of meeting emerging. We used to have the face-to-face, then you have the pure virtual meetings. You also have hybrid meetings where it's possible to attend both physically and virtually. And I really think governance committee should be looking as a priority what we do emerging from the pandemic and to a business as usual situation in terms of which types of meetings continue to be virtual, which are hybrid and which are physical. And I'd like to move that recommendation as an additional recommendation to the governance committee to look at that so that we can demonstrate further leadership by example for all sorts of obvious reasons. Thank you. You're muted, Tina. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, may I ask Councillor Jagger to pass comment on that additional recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I sort of officers. I have had discussions with officers about the possibility of hybrid meetings, and I think it is a very valid and recommendation, and I would welcome it. I don't know how it would work. I think there may be officers here who would be able to advise me on that, but I think it is a very good idea. Maybe so, somebody else would like to answer that, Chris.
I think Chris here could perhaps give us some guidance on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, currently under legislation, hybrid meetings aren't actually legal. So they're looking, I believe the governor are looking at the changes to legislation before May, because the current virtual procedural rules or how meetings like we're running now are only in place for a year. So the laws will have to change to allow hybrid meetings or even to allow virtual meetings, because following, if there's no change after May, committees will have to go back into person. So it's absolutely fine for the Commission, should it so wish to, is to add in that recommendation. But that's just for clarity in terms of where we currently are and the legislation behind it. Thank you.
Can I come back on that through you, Chair, please?
May I put that to Commission members then, if any Commission member?
Chair, could I come back on that? I've got a question really for the Democratic Services Officer. It's quite important because I think that answer in legislation terms might well have referred to only formal decision-making committees, but we have a good number of working groups and ad hoc meetings that are not making decisions, and I think there's a distinction to be drawn between the two types of meeting, and that therefore that second type of meeting processes could be developed for that, even in the absence of new legislation.
Just for confirming that, Councillor Lanza, yes, absolutely, hybrid meeting or hybrid working between members and officers for working groups and other factors are absolutely viable, and governance can have a look at that. I was just clarifying for public meetings like we're in at the moment. Virtual meetings and hybrid meetings can only last till May, unless primary legislation has changed. I know it is being looked at though because of how well these sort of meetings have worked. Thank you.
Does any other commission member wish to ask questions? Councillor Peter Smith, you're muted, but your camera is on. You're not a commission member. Do you wish, Councillor Barrett, you've just put your camera on. Is that because you wish to comment, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I've got a few comments, if I may. I mean, firstly, can I also add my comments to what everybody else has said? You know, thank the panel and the officers involved for a huge amount of work. You know, it's a huge piece of work, and there's some great recommendations and great ways forward there. And I also thank Councillor Jaggard, particularly for her leadership of the panel and the presentation that she's given this evening. I mean, generally, I would be supportive of the vast majority of the recommendations. There is one that I'm not happy with, which I'll speak about in a moment. But there's also one that I really just wanted, that I suppose I just have some reservations about. I'll deal with that one first. That is the one, recommendation F, regarding the possibility of lowering the pool temperature at K2 Crawley. Now, I know Councillor Jaggard said in her presentation, some people like it warm, some people like it cold, you know, and it's sort of horses for courses. But I suppose what I really wanted to ask, particularly if there's an officer here who might be able to comment on it, is whether we feel that that would cause any problems for our leisure contractor or for usage of K2. You know, if it were to actually put some people off using the pool. I don't know. I'm not a user of the swimming pool myself, so I don't know what it's likely to cause. But what I'm just wondering is there going to be discussion with the contractor about what could or couldn't happen, and you know how forcibly would we go down that route? Because what I would be concerned about is a situation where, you know, obviously K2 has had to be closed for a long period of time. There are financial issues arising from that contract with the council, and we wouldn't want to do anything that would actually put some people off using it and actually reduce usage. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that. In fact, I'll come back and deal with the other one after. Would that be okay?
Councillor Jaggard, would you like to comment on that? Oh, I know Councillor Mullins wants to.
Yes, Councillor Mullins, I think, wants to come in, but just to say that we realise that there are industry standards, and we're not suggesting that we lower the temperature to, you know, really outside of those boundaries, but just, you know, 1 or 2, I don't know, 1 degree, who knows what will make a difference. But I think Councillor Mullins would like to add to that.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't intending to come in as I'm not a member of your commission, but I did feel that when Richard asked for comments on this that I needed to say something. I do get, you see, there's 2 types of user of the pool. There's the sports users who, when it's, if you like, in full 50-metre mode, they like fairly cold water because they're swimming very fast and they're very active. And there's a conflict of interest, quite honestly, because there's also, when we have different modes, don't forget, we have 3 floors that move in the pool, and it changes to different modes. And we have a lot of children and families using the pool who are not so active, some in fact learning to swim. So what the grumbles that I've got in the past, and probably by the sound of it might get in the future, is that families tend to think that the Crawley pool already is too cold. Now I've had quite a lot put to me about that, and some families say that they go to Horsham because they like the fun aspect of what they've got at Horsham, and the water's warmer and the kids enjoy it more. I don't want to lose Crawley people to Horsham or to Mid Sussex or anywhere else. I want them to come to Crawley, and I'm very concerned that if we make the situation uncomfortable for our families, You know, I mean, I'm sure we won't upset the sports people, but we will upset families, and we have to consider everybody. Thank you. I won't say any more than that.
Thank you, Councillor Mullins. Councillor Peter Smith, your camera is on. Is this because you wish to speak, although you're not?
Councillor Barrett.
All right. Okay. Councillor Barrett, sorry.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for those responses. The other one I wanted to refer to was the paperless meetings, and yeah, I mean, there's been a lot said about that, and I like everybody else, I fully accept the need for us to minimise the use of paper and printing as much as possible. But I am going to put a slightly different view, which some people probably won't like, but I am going to say this, that if you look at tonight's agenda, it's 169 pages of paper. And, I've always taken the view that if you're going to be a councillor and you're going to take part in meetings, you need to read your paperwork properly. You need to do it thoroughly. You need to go through, you need to formulate questions, you need to concentrate on it. And I always do that. And, I've gone through this huge wad of paper over the last few days, and it's taken, I don't know how many hours, but it's taken quite a few hours. And I've been used to always being able to do that with paper. Now, I appreciate people will say, yes, you've got to learn a new way of working and so on. But I can tell you, as somebody who has back and neck problems caused by a major operation that I had some years ago, that if I've got to spend however many hours sitting in front of a screen reading this paperwork for 170 pages for however many hours, that is going to damage my back and neck further. That is going to cause me problems in the future, not to mention the damage it does to your eyesight. So I do think we are going to have to look at this. Either we're going to have shorter agendas and shorter reports, or we're going to have some provision for those people who find it actually very difficult to sit in front of the screen for long periods of time. Councillor Jaggard said, all this paperwork has been produced twice, Cabinet and OSC, and she's absolutely right on that. And that's something else that I would like to point out, that didn't used to happen. If you actually think back to a few years ago, we used to have a system of what they called the Cabinet and OSC reports pack, which was, if you look at tonight's agenda, we've got 7 major reports, all of which are on the agendas for both the OSC and the Cabinet this week. And I think the Cabinet's got a couple of other short reports which are not going to OSC. And in the old days, before modern.gov, we used to have an agenda for the OSC with papers, an agenda for the Cabinet with papers, and then a joint pack. So what that would have been, if you look at tonight's agenda, is the OSC paperwork would have just been the covering agenda sheet plus the minutes. The Cabinet paperwork would have been the Cabinet agenda plus the minutes, plus the 2 short reports that aren't going to OSC. And then there would have been a third document that was called the joint pack, which was the 7 reports going to both. So those of us that attended both meetings used to get it once, and it was only printed once for it. Then we got modern.gov and we were told, sorry, you can't do that anymore, and it all got printed twice. So I'm not quite sure how many tons of CO2 modern.gov has actually created. That's what's happened, because we used to have it as one piece of paper, one document, and now it's coming through as 2. And that's been the case for the last few years. So, all I would say is, I will try to go paperless if that's what everybody wants, and what we're going to do. But, it will cause some of us severe problems. And, if some of us find, particularly with large agendas, that we just cannot cope with them online, and we have to print them off ourselves, and we can't do that at home, that's going to mean a car journey to the town hall and a car journey back again that we wouldn't have made, when obviously all the emissions that creates. So, it could be counterproductive, but it is going to cause some of us some problems, particularly if we want to actually go through things in detail, read things properly, and give this paperwork the scrutiny it deserves. The other alternative is that people don't bother with it properly, which may or may not happen if they find it difficult to cope with. So I'm not in any way, I don't want that to sound negative about principle, because I do agree with it, and I do agree we should try to keep down on public
Ask if
music.
anybody else.
It is going to cause problems.
I'll ask if it.
And I think that needs to be recognised when some other members take the "oh well, get some glasses" attitude, which actually is quite offensive.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Jagger, would you like to comment briefly on this as we're over on time?
Yes, thank you. Yes, regarding members who have disabilities or extra needs and concerns, that obviously would be catered for. We're not going to force people to do something that they cannot do. It comes under the Discrimination Act, I'm quite sure. So provision will be made for those people who do have difficulties. One thing I would like to say is that Councillor Eade has actually fully embraced using technology, because for her you can make the document much easier to read, and you can search that you can make the print really big on the tablet here, and also the tablet has there are software packages that have the ability to actually read documents to you, and I believe that was used by other councillors in the past who had sight difficulties. So these things can be catered for quite. That shouldn't prevent the majority of the councillors being able to use the tablet, and with the tablet, of course, it is fairly lightweight. It can be easily picked up, and you could, if you wanted to, sit on a sofa. And I know that I have read in the summer when it was sunny, and I used to take it down to the bottom of the garden and sit under the tree and read documents there. So it isn't necessarily a matter of sitting at a table on a hard chair. These things can be accommodated with the different technologies, and so I appreciate what Councillor Barrett has said, and I appreciate that some people do find it more difficult than others, and those people will be catered for, I'm sure, and I think that was it, unless there's an officer who would like to add to that. Thank you.
Can I just come back on something?
Councillor Ayling, yes?
Yeah, I didn't mean to be rude when I said get some glasses. I was just trying to make the point that if you're struggling with something, get something to help you not struggle. That was the point I was trying to say. I didn't mean to be rude. I'm never rude to anybody. I just wanted to make the point that if it is something like you can't see it on the screen, then do something about that rather than say I'm not using the screen. That's what I meant. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Ayling. Do any other members share Councillor Barrett's concern? Right. Okay.
Chair, I do.
Right. Can we now bring in Councillor Pendleton, please? I believe you're waiting with a comment to make.
I am, yes. Thank you, Chair. And apologies if somebody's already answered this question. I got booted from the meeting the last time I tried to switch my camera on, which I'm assuming is my internet connection rather than anything personal. I just wanted to ask, around the review of the recommendations and the process for reporting back, how will that happen, and how often do you think that will happen moving forwards? Because obviously there's recommendations that presumably will happen quicker than others.
Councillor Jaggard.
I think it's up to the Commission to decide how frequently they would like to have a report back, and officers, it's a matter of getting together with the panel, with the working group, the officers, and decide on what sort of feedback that you would like from them. I don't know whether Louise would like to give her opinion on how feasible that is and practical aspects.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Jagger. Can we just get back to Councillor Lanza's recommendation that we have a move to hybrid meetings? I would like to second his recommendation. Do the Commission agree, or does anybody not agree with what Councillor Lanza was recommending, please?
Agree.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Agree.
Chair, can we just be clear what's actually being proposed? Because you talked about a move to hybrid meetings. I thought what Councillor Lanza said was that we should have the technology to do it if we wanted to, rather than you know, a sort of whole-scale move.
Councillor Lanza, can you?
My move, and I'll try and do it in summary form, is to table a recommendation to the Governance Committee that it looks at the future formats for our formal and informal meetings to consider which should be face-to-face, which should be virtual and which should be hybrid.
Thank you, Councillor Lanza. Very nicely summarised. Do OSC Commission agree that recommendation that I am seconding?
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Oops. Agreed.
Okay. Heather, please can you note that additional? Are you all agreed?
No dissenting.
Can I ask Heather then to note that additional recommendation, please? Thank you. Now that all Commission members have had a chance to pass comment, I'd like to bring in Councillor Jahan, please, as Cabinet Member for Environmental Services.
Thank you, Chair. Just really to echo all the thanks that's already been put on record, I just want to say congratulations to the panel for putting together such a comprehensive report. Thanks to the OSC really for convening the panel in the first place, and to the officers for really putting together the report in such a comprehensive and, well, quite easy to follow way as well. But also moreover to the chair, Councillor Jaggard, for the way that she's conducted herself and chaired this over, well, it's probably been over a year now because of the delays due to COVID. And for a presentation just now as well, I think she went through the report and all the recommendations really well. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone on that point. I'm just really pleased to welcome the report. I just wanted to just echo one of the points I think Councillor Burgess made earlier about the importance of ensuring that the action plan, as it progresses, there's regular reporting back on this to OSC and to Cabinet. We declared a climate emergency, so I think it's imperative that we treat it like the emergency that it is, and that as the action plan develops, it just doesn't sit on the sidelines, and that we're all fully informed of how that's progressing. I see Councillor Smith, this was one of his ideas actually, so it's excellent that we were able to put this forward. I won't say anything more on the report other than that I'm really looking forward to seeing how it moves forward now. And it was really interesting to hear everyone's comments, and so hopefully the advisory group can take those on board and ensure that we can have a plan that delivers our targets. I'll leave it at that, as I know there's a full agenda.
Councillor Jahan, do you think, how often do you think OSC should receive an update, please? Because this is obviously so important. 6 monthly?
I mean, I think that's a conversation worth having with the officers who will be preparing it, because in my mind, if they were preparing a report on a report that they're putting together, that doesn't quite make as much sense. And obviously it's quite resource intensive to do such things. So to make it as easy but as informative as possible, so I think that's a question really for the officers, and to ask them to see what's most feasible and practical and also most effective for us as well, because I'm sure there's not reams of paper we'd like to go through, maybe verbal updates or something like that. But again.
Okay. Councillor Jagger, would you like to add anything further, please?
No, I would thank Councillor Jahan for his kind words on that. It is a huge report, and the officers, we had such interesting witness sessions, Metrobus, West Sussex County Council, Manor Royal, really very, very interesting comments from the outside witnesses, also from the other Extinction Rebellion, the Green Party, all sorts of people coming in. So it was a huge amount of work, a huge amount of interest. And you know, I do hope that you support the recommendations. I realise that some of the recommendations do need to go to the governance committee to be discussed further. I've got nothing else, and yeah, I think that as Councillor Jahan says, to have the report back regularly, I think a year is too long, and it depends on what is being worked on. You know, it needs to be done regularly. So if a report is done, then that can go to OSC and be looked at again. But I personally think maybe quarterly is a better timescale for some of the things, but some of the things maybe 6 months. I think a year's too long personally, but you know, it is down to the officers and what level of work and what they are actually doing, in my opinion. But that's, you know, it's you guys who
thank you.
Report, and I see that some officers would like to comment on it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jaggard. Can I bring in Councillor Clem? Sorry, can I bring in Clem Smith as an officer, please, for his comments on how regularly we report on this, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that clearly the Officer Advisory Group, when pulling together the action plan, obviously that's the next stage, they will consider options in terms of the regularity of reporting back to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and we will come back as part of our reporting on that and make some recommendations to you as part of that action plan.
Thank you, Clem. I would just like to add my praise for the report as well. It's very detailed. Councillor Peter Smith, your camera's been on for quite a while, and I keep bringing it to your attention. Do you wish to come in now, sir?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. You've been teasing me several times now. I will be very brief. As most of you, I hope, will remember, this climate emergency motion was proposed by the late Councillor Geraint Thomas, and I seconded it. And so it's something that it's very precious to me, and I'm very pleased to see the results coming out of the scrutiny panel. I know there's been a long list. I'd like to add my own personal thanks to Councillor Jaggard. I think she's chaired this very well, and I support all the recommendations actually personally. I would just like to make one other comment, which is the whole point of this thing is it's an emergency, and we need to be very sure that we take implementation seriously and don't get put off by one or two or several people objecting to certain things. A serious problem needs serious solutions, and I hope that as an authority we'll have the resolution to grasp the nettle and get on with it. We've already seen in the town things where people have balked at the first hurdle. I guess that's a matter for Corinda, Shan's, and also for Cabinet really, and actually full council, which I'll speak about more at council. But I wanted to add my thanks as the seconder of the motion, and I appreciate the support from all the members of OSC. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I would like to thank the panel chair, myself, and members for a comprehensive report, and for all the hard work put in by the officers involved. There are very sensible recommendations within this report. Particularly, I like the climate assessment report to be done on any new projects that the council will undertake. I think that is very important. As all committee members have had an opportunity to speak now, we will move on to the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair seconds. Councillor Rana, please, can you second?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. Can I just remind everybody that we are now overrunning slightly, so please try to keep your questions as targeted and as focused as possible. We're now going to receive Article 4 report from Councillor Peter Smith, Clem Smith, Head of Economy and Planning, Sally, Forward Planning Manager, and Ian Warren, Senior Planning Officer. Please can I ask Councillor Peter Smith to introduce and present the report to the committee?
Thank you very much, Chair. We are accustomed over the years to seeing planning directives coming out of central government that don't work very well in our new town model and have deleterious effects on our town. One of those really are the rules governing houses of multiple occupancy, where we've had plenty, or many of us have had plenty of residents objecting to the way these rules work, and we've seen clusters of HMOs in certain neighbourhoods or in certain streets that do have a negative effect on their neighbours, and we have a lot of pressure from our residents who of course elected us, and which is why we're here in the first place, objecting to these and asking us to do something about it. The solution that's available to us is this rather technical Article 4 directions. The report before you calls upon 10 Article 4 directions to be produced for the streets that are listed in clause 3.3 of the report. Most of those are in Furnace Green, but there are others, including one in my own ward in Ifield and others across the town. They've been chosen because we already have HMOs there. We already and the properties there are suitable for conversion to HMOs. They tend to be townhouses, readily suitable to conversion, and quite frankly, people don't like them. So this report is all about listening to our residents, listening to our voters, and taking action to do something about it. So I commend the report to the Overview and Scrutiny Commission.
Thank you for the report. The process for discussion will be as before. Each committee member will have the opportunity to speak. Please indicate by turning your camera on. When you are called on to speak, please unmute your microphone and check you're live before making your comments, pausing for 3 seconds to allow for the time delay. Once you have spoken, please ensure you turn your camera off and mute your microphone. Thank you. We'll now begin consideration of the report. Councillor Pendleton.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is hopefully fairly brief. These directives at the moment cover some obviously single streets, small areas, and I can see that it's sensible because the townhouses are clearly much more attractive as HMOs because they can fit more rooms in. My question is, what will we be doing to monitor the surrounding area around these places and other parts of the town to make sure that when stopped from using the townhouses, people don't just start using two-storey properties elsewhere and just transfer the problem?
Councillor Peter Smith or Ian to answer that.
If I could go first, Chair. I think that Councillor Pendleton's raising quite a good point here, because they're not all bad, in honesty. They can work in the right place, and it's not just three-storey houses that get them. But the problem is that they end up in clusters because of the nature of the houses. And sadly, the people that live adjacent to them find that they, or feel that they have a negative effect on their lives. So that's why we're taking care of those. We've picked the ones where we're aware of a cluster, and rather than choosing to go for a larger, more blanket approach, we don't want to take away the freedoms of people to have HMOs if they wish. So that's why we've taken a compromise approach, but I'll defer to Ian Warren to give probably a much better answer than I can.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I mean, Councillor Smith is right there. I think the logic of applying the directions in these areas is on the one hand the relatively high probability that in the due course of things they would more of them would turn into HMOs, and the clusters would become more significant. And on the other hand, that these are relatively kind of limited areas, so it's only a relatively small proportion of the overall housing stock in the borough. So we're mindful on the other hand that HMOs are a important source of accommodation for certain groups within the community, particularly younger people and single people. So it's not necessarily that we're trying to reduce the numbers of HMOs overall, but that there are these particular areas where the clustering does appear to be happening, and that there's this potential to address it without bringing these restrictions on over a wide area. I mean, in terms of the question about how monitoring what happens in other places, we do have a better idea now of the distribution of HMOs within the borough, because the licensing system changed in 2018, so that 5 HMOs with 5 or more people require a licence, whether they're 3 stories or not. So whereas previously it was only the 3-storey ones. So now we've got a better idea really of the distribution, and I think that through that picture really, that the logic of taking the approach we're recommending at the moment became more apparent.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian and Peter. Would Councillor Pendleton like to come back in and comment?
No, nothing further. Thank you for the answer. I'm not saying that I'm against HMOs in general, because I understand they're massively important to the housing mix. It's just making sure they don't recluster elsewhere. But no, that's a great answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Well, can I also very strongly welcome this report and the recommendation. I think, having read through it and looked, at all the different options and the arguments, I think this is exactly the right approach. I think a very balanced and proportionate approach, and I thank our officers for what they've come forward with. I would say, looking through the appendices and the the areas that are covered, obviously I welcome this for Farmley Close in my own ward and your ward, Chair, where I know there has occasionally been some problems in the past, and obviously the other areas concerned, and I particularly note it as somebody who's been a long-term Furness Green resident. A large number of these areas are in Furness Green because there's more townhouses in Furness Green than other parts of the town. And I do know that the 2 ward councillors for Furness Green, Councillor Crowe and Councillor Reid, also very much welcome this. There are just a couple of points I wanted to make. One figure that I just wanted to query was in paragraph 6.4, and I'm not doing this to be nitpicking. I'm doing it because I think it's important if some of this information is going out in the public domain, and particularly in any of the justification for the Article 4. And that is that it talks about these 303 properties representing around 0.7% of all housing stock, and assuming all of them to be 4+ bedroom properties, around 4% of the estimated total of 6,850 homes with 4 or more bedrooms. Could I just query that second point? Because what I would say is, as somebody who knows these areas very well, those 3-bedroom townhouses were all built as 3-bedroom townhouses. They're not that easy to extend because of the nature of them. It tends to be garage conversions that make them bigger, or knocking 1 bedroom into 2, and so on and so forth. And what I suspect is that the vast majority of the houses covered by this, which aren't currently HMOs, are probably still only 3 bedrooms. Those that are still family houses, because they wouldn't have been converted, and it's unlikely they would have 4 or 5 bedrooms plus. And given that we're saying that about 20% are HMOs, I would challenge the point that the majority are 4-bedroom plus. I think the majority are actually only going to be 3. And I wonder perhaps if Ian could look at that again before that is put in as evidence in the Article 4 section, because it could be difficult if we put something in there that turned out it wasn't correct. So I'll just sort of, he may want to make a comment on that, but I'll just leave that with you. But the other thing that I also wanted to raise, specifically with regard to Furnace Green, as I say, the 2 ward councils are very supportive of this, I know, is that if you look at paragraph 6.10, one of the justification arguments is that the residential, those residential zones included with lower concentrations of HMOs but a higher propensity of 3-storey housing will in time see an increase in HMOs as such properties in these locations come up for sale. Properties of this type have a demonstrable appeal to would-be HMO landlords, and the areas in question are clearly known to the market. By anticipating this and avoiding the need to introduce further directions in such an area at a later date, the proposed approach is considered to represent a more efficient use of council. What that's basically saying is that we don't want the displacement. We don't want to and do more later. In paragraph 6.12, there is a reference to a response from Councillor Eade, who expressed concerns about conversions elsewhere, specifically naming Burwash Road. And it does say there are no license for HMOs in Burwash Road at the moment. What I would just like to say on that, knowing the area very well, and I'll declare a personal interest if I need to, because I live very close to Burwash Road, although what would happen there wouldn't have an effect on me, but I will declare if I need to. What concerns me is that if you look at these plans, and the proposals for the zones in Furnace Green, they cover all the blocks of 3-storey townhouses except one block, and that is a smallish block of, I think, 7 townhouses in Burwash Road, which I think is numbers 22 to 34, which are a little bit hidden. They're in a corner down a little cul-de-sac part of the road, but they are there. Now, clearly from what's in the report, none of them are HMOs at the moment. But what I'm concerned about is the fact that if we have a situation where we put an Article 4 direction on every other block of 3-storey townhouses in Furnace Green bar 1, if HMO landlords in the area are looking to expand, where are they going to go? Where are they going to look next? And it's going to be to the one block that is included in that. So, and I think that's probably what Councillor Eade was alluding to. This paragraph looks as though she was just talking about general HMOs in that road. So I just wondered if that block of townhouses could also be looked at for potential direction in the future, because what we wouldn't want to do is displace the issue, into the one remaining area that is. And thinking about it, and not just thinking about Furnace Green, thinking around the town, I struggle to think of any other block 3-storey townhouses that aren't included in these 10 areas. That one is. So I just wondered if perhaps officers could look in. Thank you.
Ian, would you like to comment, please?
Okay, thank you for your questions, Councillor Powett. So in relation to the question about the number of bedrooms, I understand you're kind of worried that that we're assuming that they've got more bedrooms than they necessarily do if they were originally built as having 3 bedrooms. So it may be worth checking that and seeing, whether we can sharpen up the account there of what the actual situation is. I mean, that we made that point really in order to say that we're not, taking out a huge proportion of the borough's 4-bedroom stock. So if some of them aren't 4 bedrooms anyway, in a sense, that's more reassuring that we're not limiting the overall supply of that availability of that type of accommodation to such a use. And in relation to Burwash Road, yes, I mean, I suppose we didn't include Burwash Road at this stage, both on account of there being no licensed HMOs there currently. Also, I think it's a row of about 7 of the townhouses there, so it's a slightly smaller area than the other ones that we've included, where I think all of them have at least 10 of the larger houses. But I can see the logic of saying, you know, if there is this displacement effect, what impact could that have? So you know, we note the reference, you know, the highlighting of that particular location.
Councillor Barrett, does that put your mind at rest?
Yes, really. I just wanted to sort of flag it up and ensure that officers were aware that there was one block that wasn't covered. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, and I would like to say that we've noted your declaration of interest as well as to its location to your home.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And just with regard to the point about the number of bedrooms, I just thought I ought to flag that up, because if it's being used as evidence in the Article 4 direction, we just want to be clear that you know, that we're not saying something that might not be accurate, because, you know, we wouldn't want anything to sort of stand in the way of this.
Okay. Councillor Peter Smith, your camera is on. Do you wish to speak?
No, Chair, I was just ready to take any further questions, but if you're all happy, I'm happy.
Okay. Councillor Bob Lanza, your camera is on. Do you wish to comment, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I support the recommendations. I think it's a good report. Just a question around how confident are we that we've detected all of the HMO clusters within Crawley, and what are the kind of data sources we use to validate that? Thank you.
Ian, are you going to pick that one up? Thank you.
So essentially, it's the map of licensed HMOs. So the HMOs in the borough that are licensed, those addresses are in the public domain, and we've mapped them. There are also unlicensed, well, HMOs which don't require a license because they're fewer than 5 residents in them from different households. That's where our information is slightly less clear, and I think that's partly what's kind of minded us to take a kind of relatively cautious approach in focusing on these areas where, with the 3-storey townhouses, we have a better confidence that we are the data on the licensing is showing us that all the HMOs which are in those locations. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Lanza, would you like to comment back?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask, would the use of the electoral roll increase the likelihood of us detecting HMOs that should be licensed but which aren't licensed?
Ian, is that one for you, or is it more one for Councillor Peter Smith?
I suppose it's the question of enforcement of the licensing system, and the best kind of approaches to take to that is, I suppose that would sit with the private sector team and colleagues in strategic housing. So it's not kind of directly a planning matter. So I wouldn't want to claim any particular kind of expertise about that.
I'm getting right, Councillor Peter Smith, do you wish to comment?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair, if I may. Councillor Lanza makes a good point, of course. I'm not sure whether either we'd be allowed to use the electoral register for this, but certainly my own experience with the electoral register is it tends to undercount residents rather than overcount it. I've been advised by that we wouldn't be allowed to use it, but it's a good idea, and I think there's quite a few things we'd like to use it for, but we're not allowed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Lanza, do you wish to make any further comment?
No, that's fine. Thank you for those answers through you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rana?
Yes, I got a quick question actually, Chair. I just want to know on HMOs, do they just use the bedrooms as living accommodation like us, or do they actually convert the living room and the dining room into bedrooms? So I'm not really sure of that. I just want to clarify that, because I mean, I know some people do actually make the bedroom, the dining room and the living room into bedrooms. So I just want to know how HMOs work actually, please.
Ian, would you like to enlighten Councillor Rana?
Yes, I mean, here I'm sort of going off my own experience back in kind of student days, really. But I mean, I understand that in many cases, rooms which would normally be used or would originally have been intended to be used for other purposes are often converted into bedrooms in these properties. The precise requirements around what types of kind of shared facilities should be available in these rooms is something that the licensing system seeks to pick up, but it's not something I'd be able to kind of comment on in too much detail, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rana, have you got any further questions?
No, that's all. That's all I wanted to know actually, how they were actually used, but you answered my question anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any questions? I would just like to add from a personal perspective. When I was first made a councillor, I had a resident in a house opposite Barnley Close, an ordinary 4-bedroom house, and it had been converted, so there was 9 people living there, and they used the loft as well, and there was parking problems, etc. So I think it's right that we're looking at this, but obviously we can't look at everywhere at once. So I fully support the recommendations of the report myself. So now all committee members have had the opportunity to speak. We will move on to the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair seconds. Councillor Rana, please can you second?
Yes, I second that, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed then. Thank you. Shall we start with agenda item 8? But please can you members note that we are now running over time, so please make sure their questions are very focused. We're now going to receive the 2021-2022 Budget and Council Tax Report from Councillor Lamb, Karen Hayes, Head of Corporate Finance, and Paul Windlass, Chief Accountant. Please can I ask the leader to introduce and present the report to the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, in view of the lateness of the meeting and the fact that some of this subject matter has already been touched on, I'll keep my comments brief. No one will be in any doubt that this year has been one which is in which the council has faced extreme financial challenges. The simple reality of it is that for the first time in 7 years we're having to make cuts. The majority of these cuts are from the back office, 2/3 of them are, but the reality is that the toxic combination of a loss of income on income generating activities, business rates not coming anymore due to the reduction in the number of businesses in the town, and a declining number of people who are eligible to pay council tax due to unemployment have all created a climate in which we're suffering significantly on every aspect of the council's finances, and with no opportunity to find that income elsewhere. The reality is this is likely to go on for several years until the economy locally recovers. So we do have to take some long-term decisions to make this possible. Now, people will know what the savings are. I think everyone pretty much is clear. The adventure playgrounds on the red coming up. We put all of these things out to public consultation. We did respond on the basis of that consultation by removing one item from consideration, which is the least popular one. And we have also subsequently, due to some surprise government funding, we're very grateful for that surprise funding that did come in, we've been able to maintain some of those services for longer into the year. So the adventure playgrounds will be continuing to be open for longer in the year than they otherwise would have been. But nonetheless, because of the challenges we're facing, all these things do have to close to meet our legal requirement to provide a balanced budget. At the same time, the housing revenue account is putting 20 million aside this year, or just under 20 million aside this year, to develop new affordable housing. We've got another £77 million worth of investment in capital in the community coming forward. Some of that is due to slippage from this year through being less able to deliver projects we usually would have delivered. And we've got additional funding being proposed to bring forward the district heat network and to some of which we think we're going to be able to recoup later, to potentially buy new affordable housing, where we've had seeing incredible strain on supply. Again, another consequence of the economic challenges the town is facing. The pay policy statement for staff, which unfortunately won't include an increase, but they will see an uplift in their Crawley allowance. And of course, we're having to put up council tax by £4.95, £4.95, which is an increase of 2.37%. Unfortunately, in particular, because people are struggling this year, we wouldn't want to be doing that. But unfortunately, there's no other way for the council to even keep going with these cuts if it wasn't putting up council tax by that amount. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for the report. The process for the discussion will be as before. Each committee member will have the opportunity to speak. Please indicate by turning your camera on. When you're called to speak, please unmute your microphone and check you are live before making your comments. Once you have spoken, please ensure you turn your camera off and mute your microphone. Thank you. We will now begin consideration of the report. Anybody got any questions? Have we got I was beginning to think we've got a network failure then, with no cameras coming on. Councillor Lanza. You're muted, sir. Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks to the leader for presenting the report and for the whole team that's been working on it. It's been clearly an immense challenge to get this far to balance the revenue budget this year. And I do welcome the range of government grants and government support generally to Crawley Borough Council and to Crawley as a whole. I just have a few comments. On the savings on table 5, page 89, the pitch and putt and fine turf pitches saving. Is it possible in this meeting to be clear about what is going and what is staying on that item? And I mean, if not I know there's been discussions outside of this meeting. If not in this meeting, then perhaps somewhere else. And I also had a question on the pay policy statement, which is a lot further on, and there's a reference there to it's on page 114, just to help, and there's a reference there to the redundancy compensation provisions, and also the pension entitlement to staff over age 55, and it says these arrangements are to be reviewed to comply with the government's proposed further reforms to exit payments when these are introduced. And I query this because it's my understanding that in November 2020, the government formally introduced the £95,000 exit payment provision. So at first glance, this statement here looks as though it's not quite up to date, and I just wanted to query that, please. Thank you.
Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. With regard to the pay policy statement, it could very well be that we're still adapting to those changes in terms of our approach. But I will take from an officer if I'm wrong on that further information. In terms of the fine pitches in Petition Park has temporarily had to shut down, but there's no intent to get rid of it right at the moment. With fine pitches, the belief is that the savings in this area can be made entirely through an increase in charges, as opposed to having to lose any of those services. I think that was what came out quite clearly from members, through the course of the budget discussions at the council. So I don't believe there's any plan at this time to shut things down. And could I just say on that note, actually, I think we've had genuine cross-party work in bringing this forward, and it has involved quite a lot of discussions to work through it all. And I think it's been a real testament to the fact that in the midst of a crisis, with the added challenges that are thrown on this council, everyone did exactly what the public would have expected of us in this time, which is to pull together and try and get the town through things.
Councillor Lanza, would you like to make any further comment?
Thank you, Chair. I thank the leader for his comments, and I agree with the sentiments that he's just expressed about pulling together in time of crisis. Absolutely right.
Thank you. My screen just has Councillor Lanza. Councillor Barrett. Would you like to put?
Well, thank you, Chair. I mean, as you know, I did submit by email a number of detailed questions to the head of corporate finance and the chief accountant, which they very kindly answered in writing. I mean, a number of them are quite detailed questions about particular figures in the report. I don't know if you want me to draw any of them out now, or whether we'll just take it as read. How would you prefer to do that?
I would be very happy to take them as read, since we are running behind schedule.
Okay.
Is there one or two that you feel that particularly ought to be answered by Councillor Lamb tonight, or are you satisfied with? Because we are significantly.
Well, I mean, what I would say, and this is, how can I put this? This is not meant to be a derogatory comment at all, but I'm not sure whether they're questions Councillor Lamb would be able to answer, simply because they are very detailed questions about why does this figure mean something or whatever. And as I say, it's no disrespect to him, because I wouldn't be able to answer them in his position either. They're ones that officers had to go into in a lot of detail. So I wouldn't want, throw things at him like that, in a public meeting, because they are very, very detailed, and things that he would no doubt need officers.
Chair, could I suggest then that if there are answers which Councillor Barrett believes are pertinent, that maybe we just consider those answers tabled and amended or appended to the report as it comes forward from the Overview and Scrutiny Commission.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I mean, as I say, I submitted 10 questions, and Karen and Paul have very kindly answered them all. Although one of them actually, I didn't realise I actually asked something which strayed into a Part B matter, and obviously they've answered that to me, but that couldn't be appended to the report. But the other 9 could be. I'm quite happy, if Karen's able to supply those for that.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen. So that seems to have answered quite a few comments from Councillor Barrett. Any other commission member got any questions on this? Right, okay, may I ask one, Councillor Lamb? On page 81, it says, it's a little table with the budget gap, and it says savings identified to date, minus 506,000. And then on table 2, we also, it looks as if it's double accounting, but I doubt very much whether it is that. It says 21-22 proposed savings, also minus 506,000. I'm sure it's not a case of double accounting, and there's probably a very simple explanation that perhaps by chance the two numbers just happen to be the same. Karen has put on her camera very kindly for me there. Are you going to jump in on this one?
Thank you, Chair. It is a coincidence. So the table 5 on, the table on page 81 identifies 506,000, and you can see that in Appendix 1. So yeah. 506,000 was approved in Cabinet in November and full council in December. Right. And then if we have a look at table 5 on page 89, we'll see that we've identified £819,000 worth of savings ongoing, but because of the windfall, we're only taking 506 of those in 21-22. So it's two different 506,000s. It's just a coincidence.
So it was the windfall that we got was, of course, was from the government as a payment suddenly out of the blue that was added to all the other grants and COVID payments that they've made to us.
That's correct. It was called a lower tier services grant, and no lower tier council was expecting it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So, any other comments from any other commission members? Right. I think we ought to obviously now move on then. And as we've all had a chance to speak, I will move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, together with Mr. Barrett's, Councillor Barrett's questions and answers as provided by Karen Hayes, and ask that the Vice Chair seconds, please.
I second that, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. So now we're moving on to item 9, the Treasury Management Strategy. We're now going to receive the Treasury Management Strategy 2020 to 2021, also from Councillor Lamb, Karen Hayes and Paul Windlass. Please can I ask the leader to introduce and present the report to the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. And just by way of rounding up the previous item, I should probably say that any member of the public who's viewing should not assume that a lack of questions by members of the Commission was in any way due to a lack of scrutiny on their part. There were extensive discussions involving all members over the course of many months. So by this point, pretty much every question that could be asked has been answered or addressed. With regards to the Treasury Management Strategy, we're required to publish this alongside the budget every year. It outlines how the council stores the money that it has at its disposal, invests it at any one point in time. Even if we haven't got that much money coming in the form of revenue, we do still have significant capital assets, and the sale of those assets will often result in receipts which can only be spent on other capital assets. We also collect a large amount of money on behalf of other authorities, so we've got a lot of cash sitting in our bank accounts at any one point in time, and to make best use of that for the public, we invest that. The Treasury Management Support strategy sets out how we seek to do that. There are no substantive changes to this report compared to the last few years. The format has slightly changed, however. This is not for any interesting reason. It's purely because we changed some of our advisors midway through the year, and they present things in a slightly different format. But other than that, this is the same as long-serving members of the council will have seen many, many times before.
Can I, before we start considering the report, can I just confirm that there has indeed been lots of meetings considering the budget and where we have to make cuts, etc., and all members have been fully involved in making these decisions. Can I bring in Councillor Pendleton, please? Her camera is on.
Thank you, Chair. A fairly brief one, and I'm going to be deliberately generic because I don't want to stray into any commercial territory, but where we may have investments in properties that are leased by other parties, what's our strategy around whether these parties will still be able to pay to rent these properties, and what would we do? What do we plan to do if some of these businesses do not survive the current situation?
Councillor Lamb or Councillor or Paul? Paul, your camera is on. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Very happy to answer that. Apologies, my connection is a bit poor here. The reality is that some of those businesses may well move on at the end of their lease. While we still got leases, we obviously expect people to continue to pay the rent, or we will try and get as much value as possible back out of any liquidators at the end of a business going under. You know, in practice, these are investments to be made on the basis of what were the best financial decisions we could make at that point in time. Obviously, if that worst does happen in those cases, then we will have to decide at that point whether or not it makes more sense to try and get someone back in that building, or to try and release some of that capital by selling the building on. But it's going to have to depend upon the circumstances we're in as and when that happens, which may be sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lamb. Councillor Pendleton, would you like to make any further comment?
No, thank you very much for your answer.
Right. Any other questions from OSC members? Councillor Barrett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, again, you'll be aware I submitted a list of quite detailed questions, of which I think there were 12 in total. And again, the majority of those are very detailed questions about particular aspects of the report, particular detailed mathematical things. So it might be better, as they've been answered by officers, again, for those to be appended to the report. But there were just a couple which are more sort of policy type questions, and one which also I think Karen's answer actually identified that she was going to make a change to one of the recommendations. So I wonder perhaps if I just do those and we'll table the others.
That would be very acceptable, yeah.
But let me say, I'm just scrolling through them. As I say, some of them are just factual. Things, yes. One of them refers to paragraph 7.12 on page 134. Obviously, I have the answer to this question that Karen and Paul have kindly supplied, but I think it's worth bringing it out in public. The information in 7.1.2 is quite worrying to read about the possibility of negative interest rates. And my question was, what are the likely implications of a negative interest rate in terms of the value of our investments already placed, which may be reduced at their maturity date as a result of a move to
Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. I mean, look, in the event of a negative interest rate, we're going to have to decide, is there a better approach to what we've been doing with our money? I mean, so far, you'll remember, Richard, there was a time when we were getting back £6 million a year in the form of interest for the council, and that was enabling us to provide services. If we're no longer able to rely upon any income, that's going to have an impact. If we're actually losing value in terms of that, then we may well have to decide, is it better to spend some of that money now on providing facilities rather than waiting to see it depreciate further. But we're not at that point yet. If we do get to the point where we are seriously seeing the value of the council's resources decline, then at that point in time we'd have to take a decision as to what we're going to do then.
Councillor Barrett, do you want to comment further?
Well, not really. No, it was, as I say, it was a concern about the possibility of some of our current investments actually coming back, worth less than they were when we put them in. But that has, I don't know if Karen wants to sort of elaborate on the answer she gave me at all.
Karen? Paul, are you coming in on this? Yep. Paul, you're muted.
Yeah, the most of the investments we have are done at a fixed rate, so there'll be no chance of the existing investments coming back at less than we put them out at. It could be that future investments might be done at negative interest rates, although we'll have to see where that comes, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, the next one was the one that it's just a minor one. I think it's probably a typo, but Karen did say she was going to make a change as a result, and I think it's important, which is paragraph 7.1.17 on page 137. The first paragraph says that the maximum to be lent to any one organisation will be £5 million, but that doesn't actually fit with the counterparty limits in the table at 7.1.5 on page 134, which shows higher limits in some categories. And again, Karen or Paul may want to just refer to the change they're going to make.
Councillor Lamb, Paul, who's going to answer? Paul.
Yeah, this is an inconsistency in the report. It's a new format from our new advisors, and just getting to grips with the reporting format. And you're right, there is an inconsistency between the two paragraphs. I suggest we change paragraph 7.1.17 to 15 million to fit in with the table in 7.1.5. That will mean increasing the risk of the reserves to 25%, though, although that will mean that'll only occur if the investment is totally lost, which will be very unlikely.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, it was a sort of more general question that doesn't refer to any paragraph in the report, but it was just something I wanted to really clarify. And I think it might be worth doing this in public. Several local authorities in severe financial difficulty have issued Section 114 notices, which is described as effectively declaring bankrupt. And my question was, in the event that any authority in which we placed investment would do that, what would be the effect on our investment? Would they be protected, or could we be at risk of losing them?
To be honest, Richard, I'm not going to be 100% sure on the details in terms of that. I mean, there is a reason why local authorities are covered by the government's credit rating, which is that even if a local authority is notionally gone over budget, it doesn't actually get shut down. They have people set in that people put in who do go in and sort the budget out. So hypothetically, there might be a really, really bad scenario where that happens, but I think you're facing some severe national circumstances that's happening at the same time. Certainly, I wouldn't anticipate that any local authority that we had money invested in would default on anything like what we're going to invest with them.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's a very, very similar to the response that I got from officers. So that's reassuring. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, have you finished questioning now?
Well, I think so. As I say, the others were quite detailed questions about particular figures in the report and so on, and again have been answered by email. So I'm happy for those to be added if that's how you want to do it.
Thank you for that. I would like to ask Councillor Lamb a couple of things, if I may. Ask High Street, the restaurant that we acquired on page 139 there. What is the current state of play on that, Councillor Lamb? Because Ask aren't trading. Are we in a position to repossess it, or have they still got possession of it?
I think, given our sort of financial relationship with them, I probably shouldn't be discussing in the public forum quite what the situation is. I mean, obviously the council wants to ensure it accrues the maximum amount of value from that property possible.
Right, okay. Right, thank you. Right, all committee members now have had the opportunity to speak, so we will move on to the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair second. Councillor Rana, please can you second?
Yes, I second that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. Moving on then to our third and final report from our wonderful finance team and leader. We're now going to receive the budget monitoring Q3 again from the Councillor Lamb, Karen Hayes and Paul Windloss. Please can I ask the leader to introduce and present the report to the committee? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. And while the finance team will be stepping away after this one, I'm afraid I have to introduce the last one of these reports as well. The budget monitoring report gives us a quarterly account of how the council's actual expenditure is matching up against its budgeted expenditure. Unsurprisingly, given that we sent the budget for the council back in early February 2020, we are not performing as well against it as you would have anticipated. And it's been the first year, frankly, where we've been in that situation where the council has been in deficit against its monitoring report, certainly in the 7 years I've been in the role. However, we can say that this quarter is an improvement on the last. We have managed to bring that deficit down from about 700,000 to about 100,000. Not so much directly because of anything we're doing, as that we did get additional government funding, which has managed to bring that down somewhat, even though expenditure is continuing to rise above budgeted spend. So we received about £1 million this quarter from an additional grant from the government, and that has resulted in us having about £600,000 better performance than we did the previous month. It is worth saying that at the very start of the year, the council undertook enormous amounts of effort to make in-year savings. So regardless of the government investment, we're already doing significant amounts on the ground to try and get ourselves back on track. But as long as COVID is running, we will continue to accrue a deficit. I think that's long and short of it, on the basis that we have a model which relies upon us selling certain services, using people using certain services, and money coming in the form of business rate retention and council tax, which is simply no longer there. So certainly Q4 will, no doubt, without a significant additional investment in the government, injection from the government, result in a growing deficit. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. The process for discussion on the report will be as before. Each committee member will have an opportunity to speak, so please indicate now by turning your camera on, and we will begin the consideration of the report. Hello, Councillor Barrett.
Well, thank you, Chair. It's me again, as you can see, and again, I mean, given the time, I don't know how you want to do this, but I submitted 7 questions, and they've been answered in detail by officers. A lot of them are very detailed questions, as you know, on particular figures and so on. But if you want me to prioritise like I did with the last one, there is just one that I would like to ask, because it sort of raises a more of a policy issue, I suppose. So if you're happy for me to do it like that.
I'm very happy to take 1 or 2 if it's on policy.
Well, really, I say it's a policy issue. It's an issue that I think would be particular interest to members, and that is that on page 153, paragraph 9.1, which talks about the underspend on one play area refurbishment being spent on another in Langley Green. There is a paragraph after the table which says this would enable other priority play areas to be brought forward in the play investment programme and reduce the impact on the available section 106 funds. And my question was, please could you explain what this is actually saying, as I'm not clear as to why moving the Rushetts Road scheme up the priority list will benefit other schemes which are currently waiting their turn. And I have to say, Chair, such as Wakeham's Green, which you and I both know is in dire need of being dealt with. So, that was my question. Again, I've got an officer answer on that, but I don't know if Karen wants to sort of elaborate, because I think it's something worth bringing out in the meeting.
I think I could probably guess if you'd like me to. And
Councillor Lamb, are you wishing to answer that? Or
correct me if I get it wrong. Yeah, no, I'm very, very happy to. Section 106 funding we get in relation to particular projects, and they have to, at least on paper, show how they are meeting the needs that are being generated by that particular project. So there is a certain amount of sort of geographical limitation around that. You know, if the project is on the far edge of town, trying to use it funding on the other edge of town isn't necessarily going to be acceptable within the use of that funding. And so, you know, if you can use a scheme which is within, which technically meets that requirements, it frees up more general money from other sites that might be. That would be my understanding of it.
Councillor Barrett, is that? Do you wish to comment further?
Well, I don't think so. I don't know if any officers want to come in, but that's, yeah, I mean, what I suppose what I'm looking for is a sort of assurance that schemes elsewhere in the town, particularly the one that I'm particularly concerned about, won't be delayed as a result of this particular allocation, because it almost reads as though one scheme is sort of jumping the queue here. I know that isn't what's happening, but it could come across like that. You know, to those of us that have schemes in our areas that we're quite keen to see progress.
Karen, your camera is on. Do you wish to comment as well, please?
Thank you, Chair. The other schemes are in the capital programme. They will be completed within the next 18 months. The reason for this particular scheme was that the section 106 that needed to be spent by the end of June. So it was prioritised so that then the team dealing with it could then go on to the other schemes, and that does include that scheme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
For members of the public out there, perhaps we'll just also explain what section 106 monies are, Peter. They're monies from development.
Yeah, when you know how when we talk to the public often say, you know, all these people coming in here taking up these houses where they go with doctor surgeries, with GP surgeries, with play services. Well, theoretically, we are supposed to get money from the developers in the form of section 106 money and community infrastructure levy, which is a bit more of a sort of a general pot that you can use, which is supposed to go towards improving those facilities in the town so that the people who do move into that area doesn't come at additional pressure on those services. I think we'll realise in real life there are gaps in that approach, but at least in theory it is supposed to be developments paying their own way, and there are limitations on how far they're expected to with regard to things like viability, which I don't really want to get into it.
Thank you. Any other member wish to comment or have questions on this report? Right, then I'd like to sum up a little bit myself. Obviously, Crawley has been very unlucky with the pandemic hitting our airline industry so badly, but we're also, I'd like to say, very, very lucky with our finance team who worked tirelessly to support you. I know, Councillor Lamb, but our reporting is sometimes confusing, I find, even as an accountant. On page 81, a positive stream of income is a minus because it's going against a deficit that's shown as a positive. And yet on page 157, we've presumably got more income coming in because the latest estimate is more than the projected outcome, and that is shown as a positive. And I do wonder, when the pandemic's over and we've all got a bit more time, whether we could have a review of how we actually present our figures to members and to the public. It doesn't have to be a scrutiny panel, I'm not suggesting that, but I just...
Well, I'm sure officers have in the past been willing to modify reports based on recommendations from members. It may well be worth us having an exercise where everyone submits their suggestions and sees whether or not that's viable. What I would say is, as you sort of highlighted, the council's finance officers have worked amazingly hard under almost impossible circumstances, and frankly, it is a wonder that any of them are still standing at this point and not through this yet. And there have been times when, frankly, because of the situation we've been facing with businesses, we haven't known if we're going to have enough cash in the council to pay the bills, at different points. So, they will do what they can, but that'll have to be long term, and there may well be solid reasons why things have to be presented a particular way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. So now moving on. I hope the committee members found that an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair seconds. Councillor Rana, please can you second?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. This brings us to agenda item 12, and that's HAS. So may I call in Councillor Bob Burgess, please, to give us an update on the meeting that took place.
Chair, you missed item 11.
Oh, too true. I was thinking that as well, but my guidance sheet says 12 on it. Sorry, apologies. Can you please give us a... Ah, yes, I've turned over 2 pages. Apologies, I'm tired. Right, item 11, community grants, future options. We're now going to receive the community grants future options report from Councillor Lamb, Kate Wilson as Head of Community Services. Please can I ask the leader again to introduce and present the report to the committee. Apologies, Peter.
No problem, Chair. Thank you very much. And I can assure everyone that I'm as sick of hearing my own voice at this point as everyone else is. The realities of this is a bit of a sad report, really. It's much like the adventure playgrounds, that we know that one of the consequences of the financial impact we've had this year is we've had to make savings. Those savings include reducing by a third the pot that we make available for community and voluntary groups. Now, we need to preface this by saying we already, even with this cut, will still be contributing twice as much as any other council like us, and that doesn't include a range of sort of commercial property, or what would be commercial property, that we make available to those organisations. So we are still, by far the most charitable council of our type going, yet we need to make savings. And when you're taking a third out of the budget, that's going to affect one heck of a lot of organisations in the town. So we're trying to approach it in a way that looks to see what can get the most bang for our buck in terms of the money that's still left in there. And that's a combination of 2 things. The majority of the money, the vast majority of it, will be going towards commissioning services from sort of larger providers. And a lot of these people are already providing those services, people like Open House, in terms of temporary accommodation facilities that meet key requirements of the council, goals that fit within our remit, or things which are important parts of the town's infrastructure that wouldn't survive without our involvement. That's where the majority of that money is going. But on top of that, we're going to have a pot of about £50,000, which will be open to match funding through crowdsourcing, which will enable the public to essentially show which are their preferred options to receive council support by sort of voting with their own money. And in that way, hopefully trying to get as much going into these sectors as possible, or at least stretching it as far as possible when we're having to take third out of it. It's worth saying if these things don't work, that we can review them and try other approaches. And I have had feedback that said, when other councils have tried some of these things, it hasn't worked so well. But we're going to give it a go for now, hopefully, with the Commission's support and the Council support, and see what happens. The last thing just to note, of course, is that thanks to the additional grant funding that we received from the government, much as with the adventure playgrounds, we've been able to slow the pace of a lot of this down. So while it will be taking place over the course of the year, it's a phased reduction, and it enables organisations hopefully to adapt, particularly those which have significant financial commitments, either in terms of staff or in terms of sort of office space and things like that. So we're not leaving them really high and dry, but we enable them to adapt over the course of the next 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. The process for discussion on the report will be as before. Each committee member will have the opportunity to speak, so please now indicate by turning your camera on, and we will begin the consideration of the report. Councillor Bob Burgess.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Concerning grants, there are many groups, organisations within the town who do great work for their communities, but sadly they may not know how to go about getting any funding other than to go to the council. And I can remember when I was more fully involved in Crawley Festival than I am now, we used to have to submit a business plan as to how any monies that we were receiving were going to be used, and also after the events or events that had taken place, an appraisal as to how the event went. Are these two things still being done? And also, I believe at one time there was a committee of members who oversaw the allocation of grants. Is this still the case? And finally, when groups make applications, do any discussions take place to get groups with similar aims and intentions to try and talk to each other so they can work collaboratively and provide mutual help, so that any money in this, as the leader has mentioned, in this diminishing pot of money can be spent more effectively. And finally, in paragraph 518, it mentions that a new commissioning and small grants model is being developed. I firmly believe that this needs to come before the OSC so that we as an organisation can scrutinise it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Lamb, would you?
Thank you. I didn't actually quite catch that last point because my signal went. Shall I plough through, and if I miss anything,
do you want me to repeat that last point, Peter?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. In paragraph 518, it mentions that a new commissioning and small grants model is being developed. I believe firmly that this needs to come before the OSC so that we as a body are able to scrutinise it. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, of course, no objections to that at all. I mean, this whole report, there was a theory this could go through delegated decision making, but in the end, we took the decision. We certainly wanted to be upfront with people about what was happening, and I'm very happy for that's happened with whatever model emerges from that. I think we start with saying a lot of people do a lot of amazing work in this community and have for a long time, and we don't want to see that end. Not even remotely, and that does mean that we are going to have to work with organisations to signpost people to other sources of funding. We know other sources of funding are out there. We also know that there's actually a lot of reserves collectively held by these charities, several £1 million worth of reserves collectively just in the local area. So there is some funding out there already to keep them going, but people get into a routine, and to some extent we need to break out of that routine and help people to bring more external investment in. In terms of reviewing events, there certainly is a review process in place at the moment. There will have to be some version of a review process in place, even where there is crowdfunding, and certainly that is already the case. If this is not entirely new to the council already, 10% of SIL contributions have to go into a pot for capital improvements in the town. They have to meet certain criteria, and you have to show and prove that you're meeting various different things and also actually get that funding, even if people have pledged through the crowdfunding to match fund it. So these things are not without checks and balances, but we don't at the same time want to tell people with too much bureaucracy, because as you said, often there are people who are struggling to do all this stuff by themselves. There is still a grant panel, a grant appeals panel at least, which can review decisions the council takes and appeal against them if they get them wrong. I don't think we've done decided grants in that way for some time, and it rather harks back to the council in a different time when frankly we had more money than we knew what to do with, when we had a lot more decision-making committees about how to spend the money, since we had the money there. Whereas now the lesson of the day, certainly the lesson of the day for the last 10 years, 11 years at least, and actually to some extent before then, trying to tackle some of the council's reliance on investments did involve making the organisation more efficient, and making it more efficient has, involved to a large extent, some I won't say top down, but it's required that things are done right haphazardly, and that's why we have the reports going as a complete whole through committees rather than just bringing a whole list of things to potentially receive funding. Certainly, doing it on that basis would not fit with what we're trying to do with the match funding, which puts it in the hands of the community, or with the commissioning approach, which is very much about end goals, which really touching on your last point about grouping together charities, that I very much share the concern that actually there's a lot of replication potentially out there in areas where if we could bring different groups together, we could get more done. And certainly the town's homeless charity have worked amazingly well the last couple of years. They've managed to build better links to ensure that there is, on each day of the week, something going on somewhere with different organisations ensuring needs are met rather than some of the more competitive.
Councillor, thank you, Councillor Lamb. Councillor Burgess, do you wish to comment again?
No, other than to thank Peter for his full and detailed answer. Thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that, Councillor Burgess.
Area.
No, other than to say thank you very much to Peter for his full and detailed answer.
Just in terms of things like working with organisations and actively within our locality as we might want, and moving ahead, we were going to want to address that.
Okay. Right, are we?
Councillor Lanza.
Yeah.
Hello.
Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the leader and officers for this report. I support the recommendations. I just want to comment on the process. It was 2008-9 that we abolished the grants working group, and I think that was the right thing to do. I still think it is. We shouldn't be bringing that back. Just keep the grants appeals panel. There's a point about when you reduce your grants budget, it follows that whatever you were spending on administering the previous grants budget is going to be a higher percentage of the new one, and that's something you've got to be really careful about. So if we've got a grants budget here of £371,000, we don't want to be spending, say, £50,000 a year administering it. Well, that's about 15% of what we're administering. I agree with the commissioning approach and looking for particular outcomes, particularly for vulnerable people, as noted in the report. But I urge that we take care with the level of bureaucracy we create with the distribution of those grants. And I'm not using bureaucracy in a negative sense, I'm just using it in a standard generic sense. Because we don't want the cost of that to be too high a percentage of what we're distributing. And while I've no objection to the £50,000 small grants pot coming to the OSC, I'm not absolutely sure I see the point, given that the crowdfunding model, which I also support, is really quite well established. And again, if we don't really want to be spending too much on administering that either, and we need to be careful about the cut that any crowdfunding platform takes for its services. But apart from that, just a caution on the process. I support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Lanza. Councillor Lamb, do you wish to comment?
Well, as is very often the case, I agree with Councillor Lanza on that. So I was just wondering if someone's sharing their screen at the moment, if they could possibly turn that off.
Councillor Burgess.
No. Sorry, Councillor Lamb. I'm on screen.
No, Councillor Burgess. Or Burgess, could you stop sharing your desktop, please?
I'm not sharing it with anybody.
We can.
Who can you see on the screen? I can see Councillor Belbin and Councillor Lamb.
We can
we can see you in the bottom right hand corner.
Yes.
Which is your screen as opposed to.
Well, I don't know how that has happened.
There's a logo next to the unmute logo. If you click that, it's the square with the cross in it.
That one.
Yes.
Yes. There we go. Brilliant.
Are we all right? We're all right now. Thank you, Peter. I owe you a pint. Oh, but you don't drink. Oh, right.
Don't drink at the moment. When we're through all of this, I'll take you up on that. Okay.
Right. Can we bring in Councillor Brenda Burgess now, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of people have said more or less what I was hoping would say, and I thank Peter's very detailed analysis of what's happening, and also Councillor Lanza's response. And I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. I will try to be brief. I must say this is an amazing piece of work, and I thank the officers profusely for their work and efforts in bringing this forward at the instigation of the Cabinet member. Redesigning this system of help and support has been very difficult, and I must thank the officers involved and all those involved for the dedication, care and hard work. Ideas and rules for the way grants are awarded have been stripped back and examined, and what has emerged is the commissioning system, which allows for a deeper examination of what is expected from those requesting grants. Now, and how and whether these can be delivered the way we would hope them to be delivered. Apparently a small grant pot of money can still be available, as will directing to and working with other sources. The culture of Crawley Borough Council has always been seen as one of generosity, and I believe such a culture has been adhered to whilst making some very difficult decisions. Sadly, with the difficult times being experienced at the moment, the decision had to be made quickly as to how Crawley could maintain that image whilst reducing funding. Adopting a commissioning format is to achieve several outcomes, the framework of which offers help and support to the vulnerable, whether individuals or groups. And such a framework involves connection with others, culture, retaining Crawley's image of care, capacity, which will grow from working with other sources, and compassion by working alongside other organisations to ensure the best sort of help and support is given. I appreciate that many might not like the decision on the table. They will wonder why the Grants Committee could not be instigated. And for the moment, the way forward needs to be decided quickly and efficiently. Who's to say that things could change in the future? But for now, the recommendations are as they stand. And going forward, I cannot see any other way for the moment in order to achieve the outcomes required efficiently whilst maintaining help and support and encouragement. And I really recommend this to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Lamb, would you wish to add any further comment?
Only to say that as the Shallow Cabinet member, Brenda has been very supportive of the officers and the council as we've tried to approach this task, and I'm very grateful to have that support.
Okay. Right. I hope the committee members found that an interesting report, so we will move on to the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report and request that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair second. Councillor Rana, please can you second?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendations are then agreed. So now we can move on to item 12 and HASC. The last meeting of HASC took place on the 13th of January. Please can I ask Councillor Bob Burgess to provide a brief update from that meeting, please?
Right, okay. Feedback from the HASC meeting on the 13th of January 2021. The substantive agenda item was a report from a gentleman called Keith Hinckley, who's the Executive Director of Adults and Health at West Sussex. The need for savings in the West Sussex County Council budget had been recognised, and a number of saving proposals falling within the Adults and Health Cabinet portfolio have been highlighted. These include review of in-house residential services, review of shore day services, review of lifelong day services, and the public health grant. Consultation exercises will be needed along with equality impact assessment, and this will happen over a 12-week time span before it's considered by the Cabinet. The COVID-19 pandemic has produced challenges for the various agencies involved, but has led to the development of new ways of working, and any new ways of working will be integrated into the Adult and Health Plan for 2021-22. It will include different ways of meeting people's needs, working more effectively, and partnership work, including the voluntary sector. And there is also ongoing work to improve adult social care and also improve integrated working opportunities with health partners. A task and finish group is being set up to explore how savings can be made whilst maintaining services, and also how need can be reduced. Any key performance indicators need to be both meaningful and relevant. And I'd just like to add that in addition, there was a meeting held on Friday the 15th of January, which provided a verbal update of the current situation concerning case numbers of COVID in the county and the rollout of the vaccination programme. This was given by a man called Adam Doyle on behalf of the NHS Commissioners. This meeting was open to all councillors at both county and borough and district level, and I'd actually noted that more than 110 councillors attended this meeting. I won't comment further other than to say that the vaccine programme was going well because all members had opportunities to hear the update for themselves. Here ends today's lesson.
Thank you, Councillor Bob Burgess. It's very nice to have an update. We're moving on to agenda item 13 then, forward plan. The forthcoming decision list is featured on your agenda and also on the council's website. I will ask Democratic Services team to list those that have been referred. Heather, please.
Yep, thank you, Chair. As Commission members can see from the agenda and also documented on the website, there are two reports that have been referred to the OSC meeting on the 8th of March, and these will be considered by Cabinet on the 10th of March. The two reports are the Economic Development Strategy and West Sussex Health and Care in Housing, the Memorandum of Understanding. Other items that members will have received email notifications about and that are on the website under the forthcoming decisions notice are the Annual Community Infrastructure Levy, which is the SIL statement, proposed extension of air quality management area boundary, community grant allocations and procurement shared service. So if any OSC member wishes to refer any further item, please can you indicate by turning your camera on, and also please clearly indicate your reasons why. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Barrett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I think Heather's answered my question was going to be that there's no reference in this item on the agenda to when these will be coming forward. Normally it says which meetings they're coming forward to, but I'm assuming the four that are listed there, if two that have been referred and two if they were referred, would be the 8th of March. But just to say, I mean, on these, the annual SIL statement, I think, is a fairly straightforward document, and I don't think it's particularly controversial. So personally, I wouldn't suggest that be referred unless anybody else wants to. But I do think we ought to see the proposed extension of the air quality management area, because that, you know, that is of particular interest to those of us who represent Pound Hill and Three Bridges, and it is a key issue on the eastern side of the town. So I would like us to refer that. I didn't actually catch what the other two were because they're not listed here that Heather referred to. Maybe other members will pick up on those as well.
Heather, please.
Yep, the others, we had the SIL statement, as you've mentioned, the AQMA, the
The other two are community grants, allocations and procurement shared service.
Personally, I'm not sure either of those are something I would flag up for referral. The community grants allocations I'm not quite clear on, because that sounds like it's the actual decisions on those which are normally delegated to the individual cabinet member rather than going to the cabinet. But maybe that's going to be slightly different this year because of what we've heard about the earlier report. But personally, as I say, the one I would want to see would be the AQMA, and obviously others may want to raise other points.
I agree, Councillor Barrett. The air quality would be interesting to have. Yeah. Any other comments? With the air quality? Does any other member wish to comment, please? Should we move on to supplementary agenda then? There is no supplementary agenda. With the business of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission of the 1st of February 2021 concluded, the meeting is now closed at 9:39. Thank you very much for your time, especially to our finance team, who I understand have probably got meetings tomorrow and Wednesday. Thank you, Karen, so much, and Paul, and all members.